everyone. Welcome. This is the Wednesday, May 22nd, 2019 afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Carla, please call the roll.
Fish.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Udaly.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here, and we're going to hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your name is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Very good. Carla, could you please read the first item, 477?
Approval of the fiscal year 2019-20 budget for the city of Portland.
Very good. And colleagues, I'd like to just make an announcement at the beginning of this. I know there's a lot of people here. They want to hear our deliberation. They want the opportunity to testify, and we will certainly make that happen. But I also want to acknowledge that Commissioner Fish has an immovable commitment later this afternoon. And so I will probably call to a conclusion our deliberations no later than about 3:45 to allow us to have the opportunity to take the vote today on the budget. So first of all, I'd like to just point out that we need to take a series of steps and necessary votes as part of the approval of the 2019-2020 budget as prescribed under Oregon state law. So some of this may seem a little bit arcane, but it is required by state statute. Specifically, as the City of Portland's Budget Committee, we will hold a hearing on the uses of state revenue sharing, consider changes to the approved budget as filed, and approve the tax levies for the fiscal year 2019-2020 year. Following today's hearing, we'll also convene as the Budget Committee on June 12th to officially adopt the city's budget. I'm proud to submit my proposed budget for fiscal year 19-20. This budget reflects on my commitment to housing and the homelessness crisis in our community, supporting equitable outcomes and fostering equitable prosperity in our community, fiscal sustainability and intergenerational equity in the way we support and fund programs, creating clean and safe communities, and improving and streamlining city processes and constituent response. So with that, I'm now convening this meeting of the City of Portland Budget Committee. Welcome, Director Kennard.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. Jessica Kennard, Interim Budget Director. I'm here with Ryan Kinsella, our Interim Assistant Director. I'm going to begin with a brief overview of today's proceedings. So Council is now convened in your capacity of the Budget Committee. The approved budget is going to be introduced as a report to Council, and then action today is made in your capacity as the Budget Committee. There are several steps, as the Mayor alluded to, that you will take today, and they're required by budget law and include the uses of state revenue sharing, considering changes to the approved budget as filed, and approving the tax levies for fiscal year 19-20. There will be a hearing on each of these three topics. For members of the public who wish to testify, I want to highlight that the first hearing will be on the topic of state revenue sharing. The Mayor will then close that hearing and open a second hearing on the approved budget as a whole. To briefly walk you through the budget process thus far, bureaus submitted their requested budgets in early February. CBO then analyzed their budgets and requests. City Council then held a series of budget work sessions on bureau budgets and several community budget forums. The mayor released his proposed budget decisions on May 1st. Proposed budget document was delivered to council on May 6th. Council then convened as the Budget Committee and conducted a hearing on the proposed budget on the evening of May 9th, during which time the mayor delivered his budget message and testimony on the proposed budget was received, and these steps were all necessary before entering the approved budget phase that we're in today. The first item of official business for today is to conduct a hearing to discuss possible uses of state revenue sharing. I now turn this over to the mayor to introduce the state revenue sharing hearing.
Thank you. I'm now opening a hearing to discuss possible uses of state revenue sharing. This hearing is being held by the City Council of Portland, Oregon in compliance with the provisions of the State Revenue Sharing Regulations, ORS 221.770. It's to allow citizens to comment on the possible uses of these funds in conjunction with the annual budget process. As proposed for council adoption, the fiscal year 2019-20 budget anticipates receipts totaling $22,466,522 from state revenue sharing. As has been the case in prior years, it's proposed that this revenue be allocated in equal parts to support fire prevention and police patrol services. Is there anyone here today that wishes to be heard on this subject of revenue sharing? I'm now closing this hearing to discuss possible uses of state revenue sharing. Director Kennard, you're up again.
Thank you. All right, so today council is going to consider changes to the proposed budget. These changes are going to take two different forms. There are changes that are included in the approved budget as filed, which are detailed in the change memo attachment B that was filed. There are also changes that can be considered by floor amendment. There are a number of parliamentary steps to this process, and the City Attorney's Office has confirmed the following steps and procedures. First, we will need agreement from the Budget Committee to consider the changes that are in the change memo as filed. This is accomplished by having a motion and a second to consider these changes. Next, we're going to open the floor to amendments. Each amendment will need to be individually motioned and seconded. Then, we will call for public testimony on the floor amendments, the changes in the memo, and on the budget as a whole. Further amendments can be made following public testimony. Next, we will need to vote on the inclusion of each individual amendment. Council will then vote to approve changes to the proposed budget as presented in the memo as amended on the floor. This will feel like a vote to approve the budget, but this is actually just a vote to bundle all of the changes that council has individually voted upon into one approved budget. And then finally, council will then vote again to approve the budget as amended. Mayor, now is your opportunity to take the first step in this process by motioning to approve changes to the proposed budget as presented in the memo that was filed.
Very good. I call to entertain a motion to
Mayor,
Commissioner Fish.
I move to adopt the changes in the change memo.
Second.
Commissioner Fish moves. Commissioner Fritz seconds to approve changes to the proposed budget as presented in attachments B, C, and D of the memo approval of the budget for the City of Portland.
Great. At this point, we'll discuss changes to the proposed budget. As a reminder, the approved budget before you is $5.6 billion. The total general fund discretionary budget is now $609 million. There are 674 total FTE. In terms of new general fund discretionary resources, this budget includes $2.4 million of new ongoing general fund discretionary and $18.4 million of new one-time discretionary resources, plus one-time carryover from the current year. Unrestricted general fund contingency in the approved budget as filed stands at just under $1.9 million. As a reminder, changes to the proposed budget were also considered at last Tuesday's approved budget work session. The changes to the mayor's proposed budget that were included in the approved budget as filed include various technical adjustments in addition to the following changes to the general fund. It included $100,000 in one-time for the Portland Dark Skies project, $270,000 in one-time for the anti-displacement plan, $250,000 in one-time of additional funding for the census project, $142,084 in one-time resources for a health and wellness coordinator in the Fire Bureau, $142,000 of one-time for the film office in Prosper Portland, $150,000 in one-time for the Office of Rental Services outreach, a reduction of $642,511 of carryover funding for the fire self-contained breathing apparatus, and a reduction of unrestricted contingency by $361,571 to fund some of these changes. In terms of changes to the recreational cannabis fund, there were the following changes. We shifted $50,000 of one-time and $50,000 of ongoing general fund from Mercatus My People's Market to the recreational cannabis fund. Shifted current Inclusive Business Resource Network Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative funding of $233,126 from general fund ongoing to recreational cannabis fund. Shifted an additional $100,000 of one-time and $94,000 ongoing for the Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative, also to the Recreational Cannabis Fund. And we increased ongoing general fund discretionary by $377,126 for Fire's Rapid Response Vehicle Program and reduced the cannabis fund resources by the same amount. These are the current changes to the proposed budget that are in the approved budget as filed, and additionally, the council may also consider floor amendments. In a moment, the mayor will call for those amendments. As a reminder, individual amendments to the approved budget should note the amount, bureau, purpose, and funding source. We have stock language available if needed. Each amendment needs to be motioned and seconded for discussion. There are currently several amendments that CBO is aware of and I believe have been distributed to you all. Once all the amendments have been moved and seconded, then the mayor will call for public testimony. After testimony, there will be a vote on the individual amendments. Mayor, you can now call for amendments.
Very good. I will call for amendments, if you don't mind, colleagues. I'd like to start with what I would call the larger package of amendments. These are amendments, some of which come from my office, some of which come from my colleagues, some from a sense of consensus. The first amendment that I would propose, number one, is a motion to amend attachment D to add the following budget note: policy on stipends for advisory body members. City Council directs the Office of Community and Civic Life, working with the Office of Equity and Human Rights, Bureau of Human Resources, the City Attorney's Office, to conduct a thorough analysis of current practices and policies for providing stipends to volunteer members of city advisory bodies, looking both at existing practice for the City of Portland advisory bodies and examples of stipend policies and practices used by other jurisdictions. The Bureau shall present the findings of this analysis and a recommendation for a citywide policy on stipends for advisory bodies to council by January 2020. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Commissioner Fritz. Number two, motion to amend attachment D to add the following budget note: Auditor's Office, prior year underspending. Beginning in fiscal year 2019-20, the City Council directs the City Budget Office to create a sub-fund in the General Reserve Fund. Annually, as part of the fall supplemental budget process, CBO is directed to transfer prior year underspending in the Auditor's Office to the sub-fund for the purpose of funding duties as charter mandated or agreed to by city auditors. So
Second.
moved. Seconded by Commissioner Fish. Number three,
Excuse me.
Commissioner Hardesty.
I'd like to amend the amendment that you just moved forward. Is this the appropriate time to do that?
Yeah, certainly.
I'd like to offer a line be added to that amendment that would read, "The total amount of the sub-fund shall not exceed $500,000. Any excess underspending of the auditor's office shall be included in general fund year-end underspending."
As the proposer, I have no problem with that as a friendly amendment. Commissioner Fish, are you still okay with the second under that condition?
Well, you're the sponsor. If you don't have a problem, I'm okay.
I most certainly do not. Item number three, motion to allocate $100,000 in recreational cannabis tax resources to the Portland Housing Bureau. Allocate $100,000 in one-time recreational cannabis tax resources to the Portland Housing Bureau for records expungement for communities disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. This action is funded by a $100,000 reduction to the recreational cannabis tax contingency, reducing the amount of unallocated cannabis tax revenues to $659,600. Amend attachments B, C, and E as necessary.
Second.
So moved. Seconded by Commissioner Udaley. Commissioner Hardesty,
I'd like
then
to thank
Commissioner
Commissioner Udaley for proposing this.
Commissioner Hardesty?
Is this an appropriate time to ask a question about this?
Sure.
My question is, why the Portland Housing Bureau? What expertise do they have in actually expunging records? I would think the Office of Civic and Community Life would be the more appropriate place.
I don't know if Cupid Alexander is here, or somebody from the Housing Bureau could talk about the expungement pilot. Is there somebody here? Maybe we could get somebody later in the hearing?
I know that they did something similar last year, and it was successful, and we just wanted to support those efforts again this year.
I guess for me, I'm just wondering why we're expanding activities of various departments when we actually have a department that does community grants. That I think would be a more appropriate place to be doing expungements.
I'd like to call up Winta Johannes from my office. She can better answer this question.
Great,
This was
and,
a last-minute amendment that we agreed.
And Housing Director Shannon Callahan's also coming
Okay.
down. Good afternoon. And if you could just state your name for the record, Winta.
Hi, Winta Johannes with Commissioner Udaley's office. So there are two expungement projects that are happening. The Office of Community and Civic Life does a larger grant agreement with Metropolitan Public Defender, and then the Housing Bureau has also piloted another initiative last year. So I think when we talk about the cannabis tax generally, we'll need to talk about, how to bring together all of our contracts with MPD, but this is a friendly amendment that our office supports.
And we also have, I see Director Callahan from the Housing Bureau. So this is what's called the classic hot seat moment. Commissioner Hardesty has asked the question with regard to allocating $100,000 in recreational cannabis tax resources to the Portland Housing Bureau. Why the Housing Bureau in particular, as opposed to the Office of Community and Civic Life, for example?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner, for the question. I can tell you about our previous work and our current work with expungement. We have been running expungement work through the Housing Bureau for the last 2 years with contracted partners. We don't actually do the work, but we contract out with experts to do it. So presently, we're running a very successful expungement program with Metropolitan Public Defenders in combination with Street Roots. And so we're working to get any Street Roots vendors who have any criminal backgrounds or anything that they need expunged taken care of so that they can advance both in employment opportunities and rental opportunities, which is really the nexus to the Housing Bureau. So that's what we've been doing. Of course, there are other programs, and I can just tell you that that's, I think, what the mayor has been intending for us to continue because it's been really, really successful in advancing people's rental opportunities in the city.
Thank you so much for that, Director Callahan. My question is, so we are funding lawyers to do the work through Metropolitan Public Defenders to actually do the expungement work? Is that correct?
We are funding the agency to do that, and I believe that they're also using paralegals and other legal staff, as well as using legal expertise when they need it. And I can get you more specific details on the program as it's currently configured, if you'd like.
Thank you. I guess my big concern is that we have community organizations who are working with the populations who need the expungement service. And though I support paying lawyers, I really support giving community-based organizations the ability to work with clients so that they actually are getting their records cleaned up. So I'm just concerned about whether or not the right people are getting the resources to support people who are going through this process. So I'm very much interested in more. And thank you. I appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Director Callahan. Amendment 4, motion to amend Attachment D, specifically the budget note titled Funding for 311, to adjust the deadline for passage of resolution and to remove the Bureau-specific references. So it'll say this, funding for 311. The council is committed to establishing a 311 program for the city of Portland, but a decision point remains regarding the size and scale of this program. The council directs the Office of Management and Finance and the Office of Community and Civic Life to work with council offices on a resolution that confirms the details, including size, scope, additional FTE, funding requirements, and implementation timeline of the 311 program. The resolution shall be before council prior to October 1st, 2019, so that council agreement on the scale and cost of the program is achieved prior to fiscal year 2021 budget development. Upon passage of a resolution, the council further directs CBO, the City Budget Office, to increase current appropriation level of the program to fund the one-time and ongoing costs of the 311 implementation as part of the fiscal year 2021 budget process.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Commissioner Fritz. Item number 5, motion to allocate $85,000 in general fund resources to Portland Parks and Recreation for the maintenance of transit mall planters. Allocate $85,000 in one-time general fund resources to Portland Parks and Recreation for the maintenance of transit mall planters. The funding source for this action is a one-time reduction of unrestricted general fund contingency. Amend attachments B, C, and E as necessary. So moved.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Fritz. Number 6, motion to allocate $14,000 in general fund resources to the Portland Parks and Recreation Bureau for the Poets Beach Program Administration. Allocate $14,000 in one-time general fund resources to Portland Parks and Recreation to administer programming at Poets Beach. The funding source for this action is a one-time reduction of unrestricted general fund contingency. Amend attachments B, C, and E as necessary. So moved.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Udaly. Number 7, motion to allocate $17,000 in general fund resources to Prosper Portland for the Venture Portland effort. Allocate $17,000 in one-time general fund resources to Prosper Portland for Venture Portland. The funding source for this action is a $17,000 reduction in special appropriations for the Frog Ferry water taxi feasibility study. Amend attachments B, C, and E as necessary. So moved.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Udaly. Number 8, motion to allocate $900,000 in recreational cannabis tax resources to the Office of Community and Civic Life. Allocate $900,000 in one-time recreational cannabis tax resources to the Office of Community and Civic Life for grants and small business development work. The funding source for this action is a $900,000 reduction in recreational cannabis tax fund contingency. Of this contingency draw, $659,600 is currently unallocated and $240,400 is redirected from the Bureau of Transportation Vision Zero project originally funded in 2017-2018, the fiscal year. Amends attachments B, C, and E as necessary.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Commissioner Hardesty. Number 9, motion to allocate $133,000 in general fund resources to the Portland Housing Bureau's Rental Services Office. Allocate $133,000 in general fund resources to the Portland Housing Bureau's Rental Services Office to augment efforts around education, outreach, and communication. The funding source for this action is a $133,000 reduction in special appropriations for the Frog Ferry water taxi feasibility study. Amend attachments B, C, and E as necessary.
Second.
A motion and a second from Commissioner Udaly. Don't worry, we only have 74 more of these. We're almost done. Just kidding. I write my own material here. Motion to allocate number 10, motion to allocate $35,000 in general fund resources to the Regional Arts and Culture Council for cultural mapping work. Eliminate $180,000 in one-time reduction to the Regional Arts and Culture Council and reduce $180,000 for the cultural mapping project. Allocate $35,000 in one-time general fund resources to the Regional Arts and Culture Council, RAC, to design database architecture for the initial phase of the cultural mapping project. The funding source for this action is a one-time reduction of unrestricted general fund contingency. The city's contract with RAC will be adjusted as a result of this increased allocation. Additionally, the proposed budget included a one-time reduction of $180,000 to RAC, which was used to fund $180,000 for the cultural mapping project. The approved budget shall eliminate the one-time reduction to RAC and the corresponding funding for the cultural mapping project. In total, the project will be funded with $35,000 in one-time resources that is funded by a reduction to general fund unrestricted contingency. Amend attachments B, C, and E as necessary.
Second.
We have a motion second from Hardesty. Commissioner Fritz, you have an amendment?
I just have a question on the previous one on the rack.
Commissioner Fritz.
It seems like we're not taking the $180,000 one time.
So what was included in the approved budget as filed was a $180,000 reduction to the RAC allocation that was going to be used for the cultural mapping project as well as some other endeavors. And so they're eliminating that proposal. That $180,000 will go back to RAC.
Where's that money coming from?
It's part of the RAC allocation. So essentially, the RAC allocation was reduced to pay for these processes, and now the RAC allocation will be, that $180,000 will be part of that, the RAC allocation.
When I'm not so tired, I'll need that explaining again, but you seem very confident, so I will keep going. I have a motion to, I move to allocate $70,000 in general fund resources to the Bureau of Development Services for Historic Resources Review. Allocate $70,000 of one-time general fund resources to the Bureau of Development Services to subsidize costs associated with providing historic resource review and allow fees to remain at levels better aligned with the type of structural change. The funding source for this action is a one-time reduction of $70,000 to unrestricted general fund contingency. Amend attachments B, C, and E as necessary.
Second?
We have a motion and a second from Commissioner Fish. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I motion to increase funding for Portland Parks and Rec to avoid layoffs. I have two options. Option one, allocate $2,360,000 in one-time general fund resources to Portland Parks and Recreation. These funds will support staffing costs to help avoid layoffs of approximately 45 employees in fiscal year 2019-2020. The funding source for this increase appropriation is a one-year cost of living adjustment, for those making $80,000 or more. This change would save 39 jobs at Portland Parks and Rec. The City Budget Office will reduce compensation set aside by the same amount. Non-general fund bureaus should similarly account for reduced costs as a result of freezing COLA for non-represented employees. Amend attachments B, C, and E as necessary.
I'll second the motion as a courtesy to Commissioner Hardesty and for the sake of discussion.
We have a motion and a second by Commissioner Udaley. Commissioner Hardesty.
Number two, motion to increase funding for Portland Parks and Recreation to avoid layoffs. Option two, allocate $2,422,540 in one-time general fund resources to Portland Parks and Rec. These funds will support staffing costs to help avoid layoffs of approximately 46 employees in fiscal year 2019-2020. The funding source for this increase appropriation is one-time reduction in Portland Police Bureau's general fund appropriation of $2,422,540. The reduction is a compromise of $1 million reduction in personnel costs for anticipated vacancy savings and $1,422,540 reduction in the body-worn camera program. Amendment attachments B, C, and E as necessary.
Again, I'll second the motion as a courtesy to Commissioner Hardesty and for the sake of discussion.
Motion and a second by Commissioner Udaley. Commissioner Hardesty.
Number three, motion to eliminate the Portland Police Bureau's gun violence reduction team by realigning general fund resources and staffing resources to other programs. Eliminate the gun violence reduction team by realigning $7 million in ongoing general fund resources from the Portland Police Bureau's Cycle of Violence Reduction Program to the Bureau's Emergency Response and Problem-Solving Program and the Investigations Program. The realignment will support the transfer of gun violence reduction team officers and sergeants to patrol, and the reassignment of detectives to other priorities in the Investigations Program. Amend attachments B, C, and E as necessary.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Commissioner Udaley. Commissioner
Thank
Hardesty.
you. I will withdraw my motion number 4 and just leave everything else.
Very
as
good.
is.
Colleagues, so a number of these amendments impact the Police Bureau. It's my understanding that Chief Outlaw is here, and Assistant Chief Resch is here, and possibly others. Would it be appropriate for us to address some of these police issues at this time? Is that the will of the
Mayor,
council?
I would like to make
Commissioner Hardesty?
I would like to make the case for why I think this is an appropriate reallocation of resources. And then
Commissioner
I'd be
Hardesty.
happy to hear from the chief and other police
good.
personnel after that. I thank you, Mayor. I thank you, City Council members, and I'm very grateful to Commissioner Udaley for seconding so that we could have this conversation. As many people know, the Auditor's Office audited what was formerly the Gang Enforcement Unit. We are now calling it the Gun Violence
Reduction
Reduction Unit. What we learned from the auditor's report that came out in 2018 was that there is no criteria for Portland police officers to stop, detain, search community members who they believe may be involved in gang activity. The auditor's report shows that 59% of the stops, and this has been consistent since we've been collecting data, are of African Americans in a city with a 6% African American population. This is totally unexcusable, and it must be addressed. I am happy that we have this opportunity in this budget to talk about both how the community wants to be policed and whether or not we are using our limited police resources in a way that benefits all community members. I will quote from the auditor's report. We found that the Police Bureau cannot demonstrate that these stops were effective. This was because the Bureau did not require officers to collect certain information and also did not analyze available data. Gang enforcement officers did not record the reasons why they made stops. The team did not analyze the results of stops, such as how many stops led to gun seizures or arrests. Officers did not record how many stops led to contacts with people who were involved in gang activity, unquote. We had just this week an update on the audit that the auditor's office produced, and this is dated May 20th, 2019. What we find is that the name of the unit has now been changed. It is now called the Gun Reduction, whatever. But what we know is that we have the exact same officers who were not effective in stopping gang members now out looking for people who have guns. What we know based on the auditor's update is that, again, there is no criteria for who is being stopped. There is no analysis of why those stops took place. And what we know is, quite frankly, is that the Police Bureau has shown that they have no interest in being held accountable by the people that they are sworn to protect and serve. The only thing that has changed so far is the name of this particular unit, and it is the Gun Violence Reduction Team operates just like the Gang Enforcement Team operated. It is using the same type of criteria to make stops. And one of my biggest concerns is that we continue to have this category that's called mere conversations. I've been having this dialogue with the Police Bureau for well over a decade. I am supposed to believe that people can walk away from a police officer who has asked them to stop, and I have never met a black or brown person who felt safe turning their back on a police officer when they have been asked to stop. Therefore, I think we have an obligation to make sure that everyone in this community feels safe in their interaction with law enforcement. And if, as Daryl Turner says, we are desperate for patrol officers, these 28 officers being retrained and put into patrol positions makes the most sense to me. I look forward to hearing from the chief and others about why this is not the best use of our limited public safety dollars.
Commissioner Hardesty, I appreciate this conversation because there is much misinformation in the community about the gun violence reduction team, and this gives us an opportunity to clarify it for the record.
Mayor,
Commissioner
before
Udall,
you move on to staff, I'd like to add some comments.
please.
I share some of Commissioner Hardesty's concerns, and I have some additional concerns. First, I just want to express my ongoing frustration with the Police Bureau and the lack of data, outcomes, and ultimately justification for how they determine appropriate staffing levels and how they allocate their resources. As the Transportation Commissioner, I'm particularly concerned with the fact that Portlanders are about 4 times more likely to die in a traffic collision than they are to be murdered. Yet our traffic division is grossly underfunded and understaffed, while we have, I think, 28 officers devoted to the gun violence, the agency, formerly known as GET.
Gun violence reduction team.
Thank you, reduction, I'm going to write it down.
That's a mouthful.
Look, it takes a while for everyone, I mean, we get called the wrong names all the time, so. It's just personally hard for me to justify having dozens of officers on the gun violence reduction team when traffic division is so grossly understaffed. Additionally, I don't believe the concerns about racial profiling from the auditor's initial report have been adequately addressed. The concept of gangs is heavily racialized, and I'm concerned that the pivot attempted by the gun violence reduction team doesn't resolve the issues related to the over-policing of Black communities in Portland. I want to acknowledge that some impacted community members appreciate the relationships they've developed with some members of the gun violence reduction team, and specifically appreciate the form of community policing they are bringing. I appreciate that this unit receives additional training on how to better connect with community, but I'd urge all of PPB to adopt these trainings and standards. There's no reason to restrict it to one division. I want to acknowledge to the mayor, this is a complicated and challenging conversation to try to have amidst our budget hearing. I'm open to the notion that we may need a few officers that specialize in gang activity, because we do have gangs in Portland. They're not all Black. They're not all people of color. There are white gangs as well. But I'm really struggling with the allocation of funds for this task force or team.
Fair enough. Let me start by just making a couple of quick points as the chief and her team come forward on this particular issue. The first of which is I fault myself that my colleagues don't know more about this program. That's on me. It's my job to inform them about the program. I find it hard to understand how my colleagues could understand the substance of a program when they don't even know the name of the program. And so I think it's entirely fair. I think it's entirely fair.
It was called the gang enforcement team.
Well, here's the deal. It's not. It's the gun violence reduction team. And in September of 2017, Portland Police Bureau, and this has been reported to the council, formally rescinded the gang designation policy. And that was done out of request of the community. It was due to identification of that as being a problem by the auditor, and it was done. During the last year, significant changes were implemented in response to the audit on the gang enforcement team investigations and the GET patrol released by the city officer. PPB does not utilize the at-risk tool, which is identified as the major problem with the old gang enforcement team. So the core platform that was used by that effort no longer exists. The auditor raised, I think, some very valid concerns, but not necessarily concerns I agree with. For example, the mere interactions that you mentioned, Commissioner Hardesty, you're right. This has been a huge issue for decades. The Police Bureau does not collect data on that. And the reason they don't collect data on that, think about the alternative on this. You're walking down the street and a police officer has a mere association, a mere interaction. Good morning. Do you really want them to collect your ID? Do you really want them to ask your race? Do you really want them to ask your gender and how you self-identify? I would argue no, that gets into the realm of creepy. Number two, the auditor identified some issues specific to data related to gang nexus, gang interactions. We don't collect that data anymore. So there is no way we can possibly provide that information. So as you read the auditor dinging us for the collection of data, just ask yourself the legitimate question, do you really want that data collected? I thought that's what we moved away from, and that's why we got rid of utilizing the most at-risk tool. And I applaud the work that the Police Bureau has done over the last year to not only respond to the needs of the community, but to respond to the degree that they can and the degree that I believe they should to the audit. But I'd like the chief, she's our expert, I'd like her to come down and share whatever thoughts she may have.
So, Mayor, while the chief is
Commissioner
coming
Hardesty.
up, thank you. I want to clarify something you said first. I just want to sanction you on being disrespectful to Commissioner Udaly and myself. The second thing I want to remind the public of is that what is being called mere conversations are our kids in this community being asked where they're going, where they're coming from, having their backpack checked, asking for ID. That is not mere conversation. That is a stop. When black and brown people are confronted by people with weapons, they do not think that they are free to turn around and walk away. We know what the repercussions of that behavior is, and it is not pretty. And so I do want to have a real conversation about having accountability measures from our police. And the fact that the police changes the name of units, they change how they collect data because they do not want to be held accountable to the same standards that we set for every other bureau in the city of Portland. And so I am really disappointed, Mayor, that you would take the opportunity to take a pot shot at your colleagues.
So I want to keep this to the budget discussion, but Commissioner Udaly, I do apologize. I do apologize. Commissioner,
To her, but not to me?
I'm turning to you, and if you'd stop interrupting me, Commissioner, I could get to it. I apologize to you too, but here's the deal. I have listened while we cast aspersion on the employees of this city and not give them the opportunity to defend themselves. Let's hear them out. Let's hear them out.
I'm sorry. Once again, questioning staffing levels, allocation of resources, policies and procedures of the Police Bureau is not disparaging individual officers. I've stated time and time again that I respect the hard work of many of our officers. I recognize the work is stressful, it is dangerous, and I just refuse to allow this narrative continue from the union, the Bureau, or the mayor that I can't have differing opinions without dismissing and disparaging the entire Bureau. That's not what this is about. This
Fair
is
enough.
about the smart allocation of our limited resources based on data, not on fear.
Fair enough, thank you. Commissioner, I apologize. Commissioner, I apologize. Let's get to the budget. Chief, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to our world.
Thank you. So Danielle Outlaw, Chief of Police, Portland Police Bureau. I have with me Commander Andy Shearer, who is currently the commander over our Tactical Operations Division, under which the Gun Violence Reduction Team is housed. And I also have with me Captain Brian Osenkop, who's in our Strategic Services Division that is responsible for collecting the stop data as it relates to the work with GVRT. So I'm going to turn it over to Commander Shearer very briefly to give a little bit of background of the Gun Violence Reduction Team. And then I'll turn it over to Captain Osenkop to talk about our efforts in stop data and the analyses of the data that we are collecting.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, for this opportunity. I'm going to go through some of the changes that we've implemented over the last year and a half or so, primarily since the audit came out. In September 2017, the Portland Police Bureau rescinded the gang designation policy in response to community concerns about equity and fairness. That policy had been in place for, I think, almost 20 years. And during 2018, we made several significant changes that were implemented in response to the gang enforcement team investigation audit and the Get Patrol audit by the Auditor's Office. Immediately after the audit came out, we ceased utilizing that at-risk tool that identified the most active gang members. We've since increased collaboration among all of our partners and stakeholders and meeting regularly with members of the U.S. Attorney's Office, Multnomah County DA's Office, the Mayor's Office of Youth Violence Prevention. Several months ago, we actually visited Oakland PD and met with the California Partnership for Safer Communities to learn more about nationally recognized best practices regarding reducing gun violence. In the fall, we acquired some very costly technology at no cost to the city of Portland or the taxpayers of Portland related to the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. And that was through a partnership with Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms that allows us to use cutting-edge technologies that analyze evidence to generate investigative leads to help us identify serial shooters in our community. Since the fall when we acquired that technology, we have entered over 384 shell casings, reviewed over 1,000 shell casings, and test fired 222 firearms that have been recovered by Portland police officers and entered into this system. As a result of these tests, we've generated over 80 investigative leads through our technology that connect multiple shootings together that occurred in our community. We've begun to review, track, and assign all shooting cases as part of GVRT, where prior to that, we only investigated shooting cases that had a gang nexus. Because of this new approach, we increased the investigative resources by doubling the detectives in the division from 6 to 12. Communication has increased significantly. We conduct bi-weekly shooting reviews to review and discuss every shooting in the city with our state, local, and federal partners to better identify trends and interventions to prevent future violence. Additionally, that information sharing with the Office of Youth Violence Prevention has increased to help facilitate outreach services to those most affected by gun violence. 2018 also brought the Portland Area Crime Gun Initiative to Portland. It's a partnership and increased communication and cooperation with many of our partners that I mentioned earlier. The goal of this collaboration is to conduct investigations aimed at preventing retaliatory violence, disrupting the shooting cycle, improving community safety, and promoting community trust in law enforcement. We've implemented a policy of collecting and entering 100% of all recovered firearms and shell casings for entry into our new forensic network. And then in February of this year, the gang enforcement team and the gun task force were combined, and we named it the Gun Violence Reduction Team. The focus of the unit is to take a more comprehensive approach that aims to reduce violent gun crime rates in the city of Portland. The policy change began in 2018, but the name change took place in February of this year to more accurately reflect the nature of the work of the unit. Today, the focus is solely on violent gun crime and not just crime committed by gang members as had been investigated in the past. Approximately 2 months ago, the Portland Police Bureau, in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Youth Violence Prevention, began a process with the assistance of an independent group that is reviewing the past 100 homicides in the city and the past year's worth of non-fatal shootings to provide an analysis of the state of gun violence that has occurred in the city of Portland. This analysis will help guide us in focusing most effective methods for violence reduction going forward, to include intervention and pro-social services for those most at risk or impacted by gun violence. To put some context around this, between January of this year and May 3rd of this year, there's been 130 shootings in the city. We are averaging almost a shooting every single day in the city of Portland. Now, not all of those does someone get struck. We're averaging about one person a week that gets struck, but there is gunfire occurring in the city that we know about at least once a day. It's entirely possible that there are more shootings that are even occurring in the city that are just not reported that we don't even know about. The Gun Violence Reduction Team has taken 90 of those shootings, while they've triaged every single one, and assigned them to detectives. The remaining 40 have been dispersed out among some other units to include the domestic violence unit, which took 4 shooting cases. Homicide have taken 6 shooting cases. Robbery detectives have taken 4 of them. And then the precincts have taken the remainder. Since the implementation of this new gun violence reduction team model in October of 2018, the trend line for shootings in the city has trended downward. With 2 small exceptions, for the first portion of this year, we've realized each month has had fewer shootings than the month prior to it. This is a safety agenda that we've developed that I believe is in favor of this community. And if this was defunded, I believe there would be a decrease, not just in clearance rates of shooting, but probably an increase in the number of shootings that occur in the city. I don't believe that the patrol officers have the capacity to effectively investigate these types of crimes due to the complexity, the resources, and the time required to investigate shooting cases. These shootings, they don't just traumatize the people that are struck by gunfire. There's a number of cases I could talk about where houses get shot up, cars get shot up, children are home, people are missed closely on a regular basis. And when somebody shoots into a house and there's children sleeping on a couch and the bullets go through the back of the couch or through grandma's wall, to me, there's a trauma that's occurs in that household, in that whole family, on that whole street, in that whole neighborhood, throughout that whole community. So it's not just about the people that are struck by gunfire, it's about the people that are traumatized and impacted by this violence that's occurring on almost a daily basis in this city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Captain Ofsencott, you want to talk about our subject?
Commissioner Hursti.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation. Can you tell me what your clearance rate is on gun violence?
29%. We set a goal for 30% last year. We ended the year at 29%. That will come out in the Police Bureau annual report that should be out later this year.
Can you also tell me how many white gangs are operating in the city of Portland?
I can't tell you that off the top of my head, but what I can tell you is since we got rid of our gang designation policy, we no longer designate people as gang members in the computer, so we don't have a way to track that.
However, when the auditor came in, supposedly in early 2017, you stopped designating gang members. However, the auditors that reviewed your file said that you still were keeping lists of gang members, and you also had a list of super gangsters that changed every 30 days. And you were providing this information to patrol officers so they could be quote-unquote safe when they were out in the community. How are you addressing those issues now that you're no longer keeping these records?
It's a challenge because the tool that we used that would essentially assign a point system to people that had been directly involved in shootings through whether it's forensics, seen at a shooting scene, or been captured with a firearm, there was a point system attached to people that just from those 3 factors alone. The people that had a lot of points over the last 30 days, we felt were at risk for either committing a shooting or possibly getting themselves killed because they were involved in gunfire and could be the victim of retaliatory shootings. Since we rescinded that, that's not a tool that the officers have available to them anymore. So it has posed some challenges to us.
It is a tool that had no criteria, though. Based on the auditor's report, you had no criteria to determine whether somebody was involved in gang activity. So how good of a tool could it be if you could not articulate to the auditors what a gang member was and why there was a reason for a stop? So I don't buy the fact that now you don't have that tool, so therefore you can't provide that information. Just saying.
Was that a statement, Madam Commissioner?
That was a question. If you can tell me why that tool is so valuable when in fact you didn't have any criteria to use it in the first place, that would be helpful, yes.
Well, the criteria for the tool, I mean, without getting into a lot of detail, was if you were documented in a police report, either arrested with a firearm or at the scene of a shooting, you got points attached to you. People that had multiple points over a 30-day period rose to the top as being either as most at risk for probably being involved in some sort of retaliatory violence. So that was the point system that was used.
And I'd like to say, too, I think it goes without saying that we might have to agree to disagree. PPB at the time believed that there was criteria, and the auditor believed that the criteria was not sufficient, which is why we got rid of the system as it was to make sure that we have proper accountability mechanisms put in place prior to that. I do want to give Captain Nassenkop, though, an opportunity to speak, because I think what's really at the crux of this conversation, it's not what shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The conversation should be, how do we utilize the resources that we have to do the work that needs to be done with the proper accountability mechanisms in place? That's what's missing.
With all due respect, Chief, I think the real question on the table is whether or not we all experience Portland Police the same. And based on the data that I have in front of me, we have totally different experiences when it comes to Portland Police. And so I need to have confidence that when the police sit in front of me and provide information, that I can actually trust that information. Do you know how often I get information from the police that is inaccurate? And when I get information from an outside source, it contradicts what I get from the police bureau. So that is why I am asking the questions I'm asking today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very
Captain
good.
Nassenkop.
Anything further? I think
Actually,
that's it. Oh, sorry, yes.
I do.
go
I
ahead.
want to address the stop data issue.
So the Portland Police Bureau is required, like every other law enforcement agency in the state of Oregon, to report stop data to the state of Oregon. There's a House Bill 2355 that tells us exactly, it defines what a stop is legally, and the things that we have to collect regarding the stop, like date and time, location of stop, demographics. And so we collect that information on every single stop. I think it's important to understand that when you look at the definition of a stop, whether it's a pedestrian stop or a traffic stop, that it's attention of a pedestrian or a driver or motor vehicle that's not associated with a call for service when the detention results in a citation, an arrest, or consensual search. And so when we look at stop data and we look at disparity benchmarks in the city of Portland, we literally have 3 different ones depending on what we're looking at, right? So we have patrol, we have traffic, and then we have the gun violence reduction team. So for the gun violence reduction team, the benchmark that we use is gun crime victimization rates. That's the actual bench. We don't look at census data because it's not appropriate. And I think it's important to understand that census data doesn't accurately measure the population of drivers or pedestrians in the city of Portland. So, which is why we don't look at that 6.1% as far as the population. When you look at those stops, though, definition of a stop, the mere conversation doesn't fit into the definition, the legal definition of a stop that we're required to report to the state of Oregon. I don't know how far you want me to go into
No,
the stops.
that's it. And
All right, that's
for-
helpful. I don't know if colleagues have any further questions. I want to be mindful of the fact that Commissioner Fish has to leave pretty soon. Commissioner
I
Hardesty.
do have one more question. Thank you very much. I do know that the state definition between a stop and a mere conversation. How many years have you been on the force?
Coming up on 25.
Coming up on 25? And how often do black and brown people feel free to turn around and walk away when a police officer wants a mere conversation in your experience in your 25 years?
In my experience over stops, in mere conversation, I think people feel free to leave.
What people are those people?
Again, folks, let's
I'm sorry.
hear the conversation.
I'm sorry. Can you really tell me with a straight face that you have never encountered African Americans or Latino people who are fearful of walking away when you've asked them to stop?
Well, what we're talking about are 2 different things, right? It depends on if it's a stop where someone's not free to leave, or if I'm just having a conversation, a mere conversation with somebody. I would say that for the most part, people feel as though they're free to leave.
So can I just say this last thing, because I know for the sake of time, I think that's a very subjective question and answer, and depending on who you speak to, and as all of you know, there are members who identified as part of gangs that actually spoke in favor of the GVRT that aren't in this room. So I think in fairness, we don't have all perspectives covered, but I would like to share with you what I want to say we are proactively going to do to make sure that we have accountability mechanisms in place. We are currently looking at an equity lens tool to apply to all of our strategies. And it's not just what you would see for budget, but looking at our deployment models as well when planning missions in communities affected by gun violence. We're also convening a work group that includes the City Attorney's Office, policy analysts, and GVRT personnel to investigate additional data points that we should be collecting to understand not only why we're doing what we're doing, but how we're using stops and consent searches. I think it's important to acknowledge that, yes, there is a disparity there, and what we should be looking at is why. Why are African Americans being stopped, searched, detained at higher rates than others, specifically as it relates to searches and what hit rates or recovery rates are. So as it relates to consent searches, we're going to be looking at the information that we collect to make sure that we're pinpointing and that we're not just using the laws disparately. And then lastly, I think it's important for us to continue to educate community on their rights and knowing their legal rights as it relates to consent searches and when you can walk away and what a mere contact is. So I want you to know that we're not just taking the information and shelving it. We're being proactive in making sure that we're looking at policies to make sure we're not contributing to the problem.
Thank you, Chief. If I may, I just want to say I thank all of you for your testimony today, but I'm really disappointed once again that there's not an honest conversation about how communities perceive police and how the difference between what may be okay in a white middle-class neighborhood is not okay when you're interacting with African Americans and Latinos. And the fact that you can't even acknowledge that there's a difference very troubles me a lot. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Before you go,
Commissioner Fritz.
I just want to emphasize what Chief Outlaw just said, which is that not everybody who's affected is in the room today.
Thank you.
And thank you for having members of the gun violence reduction team and former gang members, people who identified themselves as former gang members, people of color, made themselves available to me and my staff. They talked about the importance of the presence of these officers in the community and what they do to deter gun violence activity. They repeatedly called out that the officers work really hard to develop a relationship with them, not just those involved in the gun violence, but with their families and communities as well. And they stressed how important this is when working with high-risk individuals, keeping people safe. These are the people who are affected, who are the community members who were reporting that they would rather be stopped by somebody from the gun violence reduction team rather than another Portland Police Bureau officer, because they know the specialist officers, the officers know each person's story. Another recalled when an officer visited him and his family to offer condolences when they'd lost a loved one. And when we're talking about community policing, it seems that the gun violence reduction team has been modeling this for years in developing those relationships. So I heard loud and clear that if we end the gun violence reduction team, we better be prepared to replace it with something else immediately or risk leaving communities vulnerable. And so what we heard was that the benefits outweigh the imperfections, and I believe we need to work on fixing the problems, and I will not support defunding this program.
So I'd like to move us on to public testimony. Thank you all. And I want to reiterate something I said earlier. I'm not proud of my behavior. Earlier, Commissioner Udaley or Commissioner Hardest, I don't even recognize myself sometimes. This is a very emotional issue. It's an important issue. At the end of the day, it's a budget conversation. Yes. And I let my emotion on this issue get the better of me. You deserve better. Commissioner Udaley, you deserve better, and I apologize. That is not the way I choose to comport myself. And I'm disappointed and I'm embarrassed. And I'm sorry. Now, I do hear an opportunity here as well. I hope that what is clear is there is a lot of disagreement and there is a lot of difference of opinion about what the unit does and how it works and what it should be doing. That is a policy discussion. And regardless of how the vote goes, I think we should engage those policy discussions, and they should be public, and we should talk about what's being done, how it's being done, how it impacts people in the community, and then we won't be put into these situations where we have to have these last-minute back-against-the-wall tough and often emotional conversations. That's not a good way to create public policy. So that's my pledge to you. But most importantly, the relationships on this council are paramount to me, whether we agree or disagree or anything in between. So I want you to know that, and I apologize.
Apology accepted.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Mayor.
appreciate that. So the best part of the day now comes down to public testimony. How many people do we have signed up, Carla, who'd like to testify on any of the budget, any of these amendment items?
We have 57.
Okay, so let me suggest this. Let me think on this.
Commissioner Fish, could you come back around 7 o'clock for the vote?
Could you come
We'll
back?
still be here.
Could you come back after your appointment?
No.
Okay, so we're not going to be able to get through all the public testimony today. Carla, we're going to need a different day. What can you help us out with?
And let's have the budget office come back up. What are the constraints?
They're talking about it. Give us some guidance here.
So just so you know, I'm willing to stay as long as it takes tonight to hear the people that want to talk.
I am too, but as I mentioned up front, Commissioner Fish's commitment is immovable. It is a very important immovable commitment, and I want to respect him as well, and he deserves to be here for these conversations.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor. I was just merely suggesting that maybe we could hear all the testimony and then we could have another date for the vote. Because I do think Commissioner Fish would have the opportunity to review the video prior to the vote. That's just a recommendation.
So City Councilor Ryan Kinsler with the City Budget Office. So one restriction that we have right now is that we've indicated to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Committee that we deliver approved budget to them this evening. And they've given us an extension until tomorrow morning. If Council, what is required today is that council have a quorum and a majority vote on the approved budget. And so technically, not all council members need to be here to take the vote to approve it on to the TSCC. And just like for further clarification, the TSCC requires I believe 20 days to review the city's budget before they hold a hearing on the city's budget. So that hearing is scheduled, we've basically worked out the dates for it, that hearing is scheduled for June 11th, and I think this is our final deadline for sending the information over to the TSCC.
Commissioner Hardesty, Commissioner Fish first, let's hear from. Okay, Commissioner Hardesty.
So I have a recommendation that maybe we take 20 people and then see if the council is ready to deliberate. In deference to Commissioner Fish, who has to leave. I think for all the people who wanted to testify, if people would just do a hands up or a thumbs down as people are testifying to give us a sense of where people are on the testimony that's happening. Is that a good option?
I mean,
Commissioner Daly?
Are people
I'd
feeling
support
okay?
that. I think that the majority of people who are here to testify are testifying on the parks budget issue. We're well aware of the community's position on that. And although I know it's disappointing and frustrating to come all the way down here and not get to say your piece, I think it will be said for you by someone else.
Let me suggest,
Repeatedly.
Commissioner Fish.
So in the spirit of what we're trying to work out here, which is collegial and respectful, I propose we jump in, take the first 20, pause, do some polling of the audience so we make sure that people who are here supporting a position or not are identified. Then we go right into taking up the amendments. I've got a medical appointment that can't be moved, but I can go up to the river's edge in terms of getting to the hospital. So if I can be assured that I'm released by no later than 4:15, then I'm covered. That way, if we take the first 20, which I think we just jump right into and not overthink this thing, take the temperature of the room, take the amendments up, which will be a very, now that they've been teed up, is fairly fast. and then we go to closing statements.
I think that's good, and what we'll do is, if you hear somebody giving the testimony that you agree with, please just give us a great big thumbs up so we know that your feelings are being registered and recorded. And then at the end, if there's somebody who's on an issue that hasn't been discussed, we'll ask them to come down and talk. Commissioner Fritz?
Mayor, I believe we have people in overflow rooms, is that correct? So could we please have some of your staff, one of your staff in each of the overflow rooms so that they can report to us about thumbs up and thumbs
I'm
down
getting
there?
thumbs up from that. Good suggestion. All right, so 2 minutes each, name for the record. Obviously, as much as possible, be concise in your testimony. Carla, call the first ones, please.
Okay, the first three are Richard Fidesco, Jennifer Miller, and Doug Klotz. And they'll be followed by Sam Sachs, James Paulson, and Bob Giraldi.
Folks, we're really on a tight timeline, so the first person who sits down, just take the mic and lead us forward for 2 minutes.
Go for it.
Hello, my name is Richard Fidesco. I'm the Assistant General Manager of the Rose Quarter, which includes the Veterans Memorial Coliseum and Moda Center. I know I'm late to the budget process, but we were just made aware of the potential of 50% increase to secondary police employment fees, and I wanted to explain to you how significant and detrimental this could be for the Rose Quarter and the city of Portland. Collectively, we welcome over 2 million patrons annually to the Rose Quarter, and of the 300-plus events we produce each year, roughly 150 of those hire police through secondary employment. We value the significance the police have to our events, not only because they minimize the risk of these events, but they are able to engage with the community in a way that they do not often get to during patrolling the streets of Portland. By employing sufficient levels of police at our events, we relieve the strain that we would otherwise impose on the North Precinct if we were not adequately staffed. All of this is to say the Trailblazers, Winterhawks, Rip City Management, and the Police Bureau have a shared interest in keeping the patrons who visit these public assembly venues safe from the unfortunate environment that exists today. We believe through this partnership with the Bureau that we are doing a good job of keeping our guests safe. However, we have more work to do to harden our city's most high-profile target. While we are sensitive to the understaffed nature and lack of sufficient funding for the hardworking men and women of the Bureau, the proposed increase in rates to staff the necessary police at the Rose Quarter events would be damaging to our operational budget. Should a catastrophic event occur, it would not behoove any of us to have insufficient police presence on site to respond immediately. The negative impact from a PR perspective, not only for the Rose Quarter, but for the city of Portland, would be detrimental. The economic impact that the Rose Quarter events brings to the city would not survive a major event. None of us could withstand the public perception that the Coliseum nor the Moda Center are unsafe spaces to enjoy entertainment and civic events. As I mentioned previously, we greatly value our partnership with the Bureau and the services they provide the Rose Quarter, and look forward to collectively finding a solution to all of our situations. I appreciate the time and hope that you reconsider the need for the partnership with secondary employment at events at the Rose Quarter.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Doug Klotz, Mayor and Commissioners. I originally came here to talk about Commissioner Hardesty's earlier proposal, which sounds like it's still very similar, which is to do not fund gang violence reduction team, terminate the body camera program, and also there were items in there about removing the restoration of Mount Tabor Reservoir, et cetera, but to use that funding to restore the Parks Bureau budget and also to fund an anti-displacement implementation plan and provide funding for community groups. I see there is a $200,000 item in there for anti-displacement, but we can use more of that. The conversation today, though, brought up a memory of mine from a neighborhood association in a white middle-class neighborhood in the southeast, where the neighborhood officer was describing these, quote, mere conversation stops. I mean, that's a legal term, mere conversation. And he said, well, if we don't really have the legal grounds to stop somebody, we use this mere conversation tool. Then we can get them talking, and maybe we'll find out something. We can then say, aha, and now we have information to do a legal stop. So it sounded really disingenuous, dishonest way to run, a policing outfit, and using this thing.
Folks, can we hold for a sec? When we click our fingers, we make it very hard for the person to be heard in this room. When we use our hands, we can be seen and your support and your action. So please, let's use our hands and not our fingers, because it really does make it very difficult to be heard.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
You.
So I'll finish up. So anyway, so even as a privileged white person, I would feel hesitant to walk away when the police officer says, "Can I talk to you, sir?" So I am not comfortable with the way policing is done.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, members of the council. My name is Sam Sachs. I'm here today to speak in support of the gun violence reduction team. Over the past few weeks, the narrative surrounding the GVRT is that all they do is target black people in our community. I want to offer a different perspective. I'll start with the good news. Over the past 3 years, my organization, the No Hate Zone and No Home Marchese, have held dinners once a month called Breaking Bread, Breaking Barriers, specifically focused on bringing together communities of color and the police to build. Can you stop my time, please?
I'm sorry?
Commissioner Hardesty, should I wait for her to come back?
No. Continue.
Okay. Sorry about that. A little disruptive. Specifically focused on bringing together communities of color and the police to build relationships and break down barriers. We've served several hundreds of thousands of people. The unit has also attended Blazer games, hockey games. They've been involved in discussions and 2 screenings of The Hate U Give, discussions with the chief and other officers about race and policing. These are not monsters hunting down black people in our community. These are human beings, fathers, coaches, and people they work with are committed to working with the community to save lives. Before I close up, I want to talk about one statistic that I requested from the city of Portland. In the last 10 years, there have been 247 homicides. 141 of those homicides were by a firearm. 56 of those were minorities under the age of 40 years. That's 40% of the homicides by firearm are minorities under the age of 40. We have a public health crisis in our community, and that's something that we should address. Getting rid of the gun violence reduction team will only negatively impact communities of color. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a Jennifer Miller? Okay, let's go with James Paulson, Bob Giraldi, and Grace Serba. And they'll be followed by John Moore, Haley Schulberg, and Moxie Wang. Sorry.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's James Paulson, and I'm a board member of the Friends of Frog Ferry. And I have a suggestion that might be able to help you out with your timing. We have a number of people who've signed up to testify, and we've talked amongst ourselves, and we could consolidate our group so that we could do all of our testimony in just a couple minutes, if you guys would allow us to do that.
Go, keep going.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, just keep.
Commissioners and Mayor Wheeler, my name is Grace Serbu. I live in Portland, and I've been on ferries in other cities and find them a wonderful alternative to cars. When I heard Susan Bladholm was spearheading a ferry system between Vancouver and Portland, I got involved because it's a visionary and a very timely opportunity. As a city, we should take advantage of her time and the many people that are helping her. I consider this project important for the city to fund because, for one thing, 900 citizens plus 80 industry experts and 8 teams of citizens are already moving this forward. Bold projects have always needed to be funded by the public, and city endorsement requires funding. We're asking for $200,000 for feasibility studies. It's important that the city participate in the project. It is not a private enterprise. It is a city project spearheaded by citizens wanting to create a new, visionary, bold ferry system. But this is a time-sensitive opportunity. Folks want options in transportation and welcome the work being done by private citizens, but this needs to be a public-private partnership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Commissioners and Mayor Wheeler, are you okay if we have our group approach here, and then that way it'll save everyone time?
Just to stand, sure.
Just
Yeah.
to have you all
That's fine.
stand, so you can get a sense. I know a lot of us are in green today, including Commissioner Hardesty. Thank you. So Susan Bladholm, founder of Friends of Frog Ferry. I didn't set out to start a passenger ferry service, but our transit system we have today isn't sufficient. We know a healthy transportation infrastructure is central to a healthy community. We've provided you with 50 letters of support that you have in front of you and an outline of the interactions for the past 22 months with the city. 2 years ago, we wondered, would a public passenger ferry service work here? We learned it was possible, but our transit agencies didn't want to take it on. At every meeting, people told me they loved the idea, that they wanted to help, and that I should lead it. And I asked myself, if not me, then who? We are a group of civically minded citizens who believe that together we can bring an innovative, low-cost, financially viable, environmentally friendly, new mode of transit to the region. Of our supporters here today, I only knew 2 of them 18 months ago. We can do this the Portland way, buck the traditional white employee base and create a micro-minority industry with a focus, a micro-maritime industry with a focus on hiring people of color. We can work with our public transit agency partners to augment our transit grid and provide more connections. We've delivered about $700,000 in value at no cost to taxpayers to date. We've coalesced nearly 1,000 supporters and stakeholders. We've convened more than 400 meetings. We have created 8 volunteer expert teams in addition to our nonprofit board. After 2 years of doing the work and self-funding, we're asking for your participation to help cover some of the hard costs. Public transportation is expensive, but we can leverage your investment to match with other funding sources, especially federally. The cost benefit would be exponential for our region. And Mayor Wheeler, thank you for including us in your budget proposal. Again, I didn't set out to start a passenger ferry service initiative, but here we are. And I doubt you grew up knowing you wanted to serve on Portland City Council, but here you are. We respectfully ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all of you for being here. Next 3, please, Carla.
Let's see. Do we have, I think I'm on John Moore. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to get Jennifer Miller with the 8th graders. I missed them. Is it just one person?
The rest had to go back to school.
Okay, so come on up. Sorry about that. Let's see, did Bob Giraldi or Grace Serba? Was that?
Feel free to come ahead and start.
Grace? John Moore? You were Grace? Okay.
Great. Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Dylan Powell. I'm an 8th grade student from the Cottonwood School of Civics and Science.
Who's that?
And though my class may not have been able to stay here this long, we've been working on a project called Project Citizen, where we identify a problem in our community and find a public policy service-based solution to it. We chose homelessness and hygiene as our problem, and we've been researching this topic for the past few weeks. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, in 2018, there was an estimated 14,476 people experiencing homelessness on any given day in Oregon. And according to Catherine Lindsay, around 16,000 in Portland. When you're living on the streets, hygiene is a big issue. You have virtually nowhere safe to put your belongings and nowhere reliable to shower and do your laundry. If you and your clothes are dirty, it can be harder to get a job and therefore harder to get off the streets. Everything sort of goes downhill from there, and Portland's homeless crisis continues. We're here to ask you to vote yes to the proposed hygiene package on the budget that would allocate $1 million to funding for hygiene. Catherine Lindsay, in her report for the mayor, City of Portland Hygiene Service Delivery Expansion Strategies, outlines 3 possible places this money could go. These hygiene centers she describes will help people get ways to shower and to wash their clothes and go to the bathroom. They would be highly beneficial to our homeless population because it'll help them wash their clothes and therefore reduce trash. Because a lot of the trash produced by people experiencing homelessness is dirty or wet clothes. As with no way to wash or dry the clothes, it's easier to just dump them. It would also give them showers and safe places to go to the bathroom, which would help them get jobs, prevent the spread of disease, and reduce the time and money the city needs to spend to clean up trash and human waste. The money from this proposed budget could put a big dent in the hygiene problems that Portland's homeless population experiences and help make the city cleaner. Your vote would give us a big opportunity for us to help people experiencing homelessness because they can't solve this problem themselves, and we have the power to help them. Their problems are our problems too.
Thank you. Commissioner Hurd.
Next 3.
I just want to thank you so much. You know how hard it is for adults to come and talk in this building? You attend a special school, and I thank you for representing your school so well here today.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Thank you.
The next three are Emily Goldenfield, Tommy Thompson, and William Ziegler. And they'll be followed by Ryan Sotomayor, Christina Harris, and Troy, I believe it's Vogt. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Mayor. My name is Amy Fox. I'm speaking on behalf of Emily Goldenfields today. So we were talking about a budget and things have gotten heated, but as you know, a budget is a moral document. It says where your values lie and what matters to you as a community. And in our community, funding parks is so important. Having open spaces, having community centers is the heartbeat of the city. And I know some of our community centers aren't as beautiful as the new giant ones that you guys have been building, but they're ours, and they've been around, some of them for 100 years, and they're what the heartbeat of our community and where we are. And just think about how hard Portlanders fought to keep the carpet at the Portland airport because it's part of who we are, right? Well, these community centers are just that. It's the same thing, and not funding them because they're needing repair, we've got to figure out something. We're asking for just one more year while we look for other alternatives so that we don't have permanent closures and privatization. There's got to be a way. There's so much money I see in this city, and there's got to be a way that we can figure out how to fund our community centers. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your testimony.
So it should be with Tommy Thompson, William Ziegler, Christina Harris, Troy, David Wynn, Mary England. I'm just calling some names, so if you hear your name, either come down or be ready to speak.
I got a couple of updates also from people in the overflow rooms. There was a gentleman who testified against GVRT, 6 thumbs up. In another room, 7 people opposed to GVRT out of 18. 4 thumbs up for the testimony on hygiene. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Tommy Thompson. I'm a recreation leader for fitness at East Portland Community Center. In my time at East Portland Community Center, I developed several programs to support our patrons. On Wellness Wednesdays, I spent an hour providing free blood pressure screenings to some of Portland's most historically underserved and at-risk populations. Through the SMART program, I offer free wellness consultations, training plans, and follow-up sessions. The idea is to break down barriers to health. If our community is at risk for high blood pressure or diabetes, well, let's bring the screenings there to our community centers. Let's give folks individualized attention so they feel successful when they leave the gym. You shouldn't have to be wealthy to get one-on-one training from a fitness professional. If we're looking at the current health epidemic from the perspective of improving equity and inclusion, it is imperative that we make the investment in our community's well-being by providing exercise professionals who can serve those who most need it. Unfortunately, the proposed budget, if adopted, will send us in the opposite direction, eliminating all recreation leaders for fitness positions in the city. The city of Portland deserves an award-winning Parks and Rec system. Since this has happened, this budget crisis, I've done my research around the United States. Everyone bases their Parks and Rec system off of us. Do we want to move backwards or do we want to evolve? That's my question to City Council. I think we need to evolve. Portland deserves and wants award-winning Parks and Recs, and that's what we're doing for the City of Portland. And we wish to continue doing that for the City of Portland. Thank you very much.
Mayor?
Thank you. Commissioner Fish.
Can I just, because I think we're going to start hearing from some incredibly valued employees of the Parks Bureau, and I want to share some information briefly, which I think is relevant. We take very seriously this responsibility about the potential for layoffs and for losing valued employees. That's why in January, we put a freeze on lots of positions because we were heading the wrong direction financially. We took a lot of vacant positions and we didn't fill them. We are working with Human Resources, Mayor, and your team very closely. We've come up with some very innovative strategies for how to retain employees. And I just want to share one piece of news. And this is not intended, I don't want you to extrapolate this completely, but I asked, of those people under the mayor's proposed that might be subject to layoffs as of July 1st, which would be the first wave, I asked, what are we doing to ensure that we don't lose those people? So taking a look at vacancies within the Bureau, and that's before we look at vacancies within the city, because that would be the next step. Many people would have rights to look at vacancies within the city. But I'm greedy. I want to keep valued employees within represented positions that are equivalent within the Bureau. And I'm pleased to report to you that fully 1/2 of people who may be looking at a layoff under the mayor's proposed budget as of July 1st would be moving to positions within the Parks Bureau in equivalent classifications. So that's our first cut. That's the first thing we've done. Obviously, we can't do a lot before the budget's actually adopted and we know what hand we're dealt with. But it's a sign of the good faith. It's a down payment on a commitment I want to make to you, because the people who do recreation services create great value for the city. And we have a plan, and our goal is to retain as many employees as possible in other positions.
Could I respond to that? I have 30 seconds left. Basically, so speaking to who will be laid off in July, that's me and the other fitness rec leaders. Right. The city of Portland, you just recently started getting fitness professionals expertise in these departments to help run them and manage them. If you were going to open a bakery, would you hire someone to run it who doesn't like bread, has never eaten bread, and actually has a gluten allergy? That's what the city of Portland wants to do with their fitness program.
Since you put it that way. Anyway, but it has been framed in terms of protecting jobs, which I care deeply about.
I understand that.
And protecting family wages. And what I want you to know is that the director and I have made a commitment to try to preserve as many jobs as we can within the Parks Bureau.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Hardesty.
Just quickly, thank you, Commissioner Fish, for that. When I talked to Human Resources this week, they told me that 10 people would lose their job as of July 1st, and there were another 40 that would lose their job as of September 1st. So unless they've done something radically different than what they told me just less than 24 hours ago, I would be very concerned about whether or not those are real numbers or if that's numbers that are just moving every time we talk.
Well, here are the numbers. There are 16 people that might be eligible for layoffs as of July, and I don't want to take away from people's time because we only have a few more minutes. 16 positions as of July 1st, if the budget's adopted. That's 14 that are occupied, and the Bureau has found 7 positions within the Bureau that are equivalent classifications where those people could be moved. Those are the current numbers. Anyway, please continue.
Hello, my name is William Ziegler. I've testified a couple of times on behalf of Parks and Recreation. I'll just get into it. 13 years ago, at the age of 15, I started working my first job with Portland Parks and Recreation as a swim instructor, teaching preschool-aged children basic swimming and water safety skills. I was a little rough around the edges at first, as many teenagers are, but as time went on, I grew not only as an instructor, but as a person. Throughout the next 13 years, I added a plethora of responsibilities and experiences to my plate. I helped run swim lessons for 3 years at Mount Scott Community Center, taught guitar lessons to people of all ages, helped navigate patrons through our scholarship system, and encouraged younger generations of parkies to be the best that they could be. Now 13 years later, as a full-time benefited employee at the Southwest Community Center, I help run the rental department with a team full of supportive, well-adjusted coworkers. Today, we face losing the jobs that helped shape us into who we are today. The skills and services I have provided have literally saved lives of Portland residents. I've run into families of children I taught to swim and had them thank me for the skills their child remembered in dangerous open water. I've had residents cry tears of joy because of the support I've given them given their family as a parks employee when they needed it most. I've even witnessed some of my past students grow up to be employees themselves. I'm not the only worker facing these cuts who have brought these kinds of supports to our wonderful residents. Throughout the 28 years of my life, I have fractured 82 bones and had 30 operations. I have a bone disease called osteogenesis imperfecta, but I always found myself lucky to be as optimistic as I am, and also have a job that would take care of me if I ever broke again. The thought of losing these benefits and support overwhelms me with fear and disappointment. Please reconsider your cuts to Parks and Rec. Losing the services we provide would be infinitely greater than any amount of money you could imagine.
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to read this letter in its entirety, but instead the organizations and people that have signed on to it.
Could you put your name in the record?
Yes, my name is Christina Harris.
Thank you.
We have the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon, the Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good, Verde, Oregon Working Families Party, Carrie Casiata, the Program Director of Urban Gleaners, Mary Margaret Wheeler Weber, the Portsmouth Association Chair, Rachel Burden from Friends of Columbia Park, Gary Berger, Chair of the Hillside Neighborhood Association, Alora Young from the Northwest District Association, Julie Curran of the Sellwood Community Center, Gail Hofnagel of the Sellwood Community Center, Kelsey Owens, community activist, Sarah Ionarone from Mount Scott Arleta Neighborhood Association, Machu Williams, the board co-chair of the Mount Scott Arleta Neighborhood Association, Danielle Portis Cathers, again from Mount Scott Arleta Neighborhood Association, Julie DeGraw from Portland Forward, Daniel Brown from St. Philip Neri Peace and Justice Commission, Rabbi Deborah Kolodny from As the Spirit Moves Us, the Peace and Justice Commission of St. Philip Neri Catholic Parish, Father Jack Mossbrucker from the Archdiocese of Portland, Reverend Dr. David Wheeler from the American, he's an American Baptist pastor, Joe Rassatter, a parish leader of St. Francis Assisi, the Catholic Church, Reverend John Hassenjager, a Presbyterian minister, Reverend Connie Yeist from the First Unitarian Portland Church and the Oregon Unitarian Universalist Voices for Justice, Tom Chamberlain, the president of the AFL-CIO, and others. Sorry.
Thank you.
I wasn't trying to go over time. I just wanted to say that although this room is small, thousands of people. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
And I just wanted to give some update. Number one, apparently I got the number wrong before. It was 14 in the overflow opposed to GVRT. All 18 in one of the rooms is for the community center. Very good. Community centers. And I'm told there's only 2 people left in one of the overflow rooms. If they'd like to move into the main chamber, I think we have, can people raise your hands if you've got empty seats next to you downstairs? We've got a couple.
Yeah, we have.
Good, so we have room for people. So if, I don't know how many people are in, Lovejoy only has 2 people. I don't know how many are in Petty Grove, so if Mustafa could text me, but if it's just a few, great.
And Council, I just wanted to let you know, we did get an update. We talked with the Executive Director of the TSCC, and if Council is able to, or would like to vote tomorrow at 2 p.m., we can get that extension. So if you want to continue to hear testimony and have the vote at 2 p.m. tomorrow, that is another option on the table. I'm sorry that we didn't have that earlier for you.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Jessica, according to the agenda that we have before us, this was originally scheduled for an hour, then we moved to Prosper Portland's budget, then there is another report, and then there is residential solid waste. So in fact, there's probably an hour or 2 of additional budget stuff that follows this hearing.
It does sound that way, yes.
And I think the way we've previously agreed, we're 1 or 2 panels away from actually beginning our deliberations.
Yeah, because tomorrow afternoon isn't all that much better, really.
That sounds like it. Okay.
Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Okay, this next group should be, Troy, David Wynn, and Mary England.
Please start.
Go ahead, Mary. Mary, why don't you start us off?
Yeah,
first?
hi, I'm Mary England. I want to ask you not to close the swimming pool at Columbia Park. I know you have a lot of budget considerations, but I'm a taxpayer, and I had to kind of look at it from a taxpayer standpoint, and that is, I've been told that Columbia Pool has a deficit, and that their income exceeds the cost, and that's why you want to close it. Makes no sense to me as a taxpayer. I don't ask the police bureau to make money and cover their costs. I don't expect the roads to cover their costs by generating revenue. And I don't expect Columbia Pool to cover its costs by generating revenue. This is a public service that's extremely important to the people in North Portland. I have to tell you that when I was 7 years old, I live about 2 blocks from the pool. I walked over there and I learned to swim, and that was 62 years ago. That pool was very important to me. I had a mother who was a chronic alcoholic. I learned at 7 I could do whatever I wanted. I don't think she even knew I was over there. But I went to that pool every single day. It was in the summer because it wasn't covered, it wasn't heated. And the American Red Cross taught me how to swim. They sponsored swimming lessons at that time. I didn't grow up unlike many kids in North Portland growing up today. Not everybody had a parent who was a drug addict or an alcoholic, but most parents in North Portland are struggling in one way or another, and they're distracted, and they don't have time to take their kids to swimming lessons, sign them up, go through the whole paperwork exercise, or drive them over to another swimming pool. This is a pool that's really important, and there are no private pools out there as well. So if you close this pool, you're going to be foreclosing the opportunities for a lot of kids that really need this pool.
Mary, the mayor's proposed budget funds this pool for the next year.
Only a year.
But we only do annual budgets, but I'm just saying he funds it for a year.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope you can consider doing it from then on.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Troy Broad. I'm a recreation leader, instructor. I've been working with Parks and Recreation for about 6 years now. I was made a full-time instructor 2 years ago. As part of a union arbitration, the city was actually sued for having part-time workers do the work of full-time employees without paying benefits, living wages and benefits to those workers. So I was made a full-time employee after 4 years of part-time work. I've been working as an instructor for 2 years. There's a lot of, I don't know where you guys are getting your information, but I just want to clarify some things. You're eliminating entire job classifications, so there's no bumping involved there. All the instructors are being cut under this budget. And when I say instructor, you might think that I spend all my time teaching kids in a gym, but there's so much more that goes into my job. I'm maintaining facilities, I'm working the front desk. I've developed an institutional knowledge of this bureau that you're not gonna get with a revolving door of part-time workers, okay? These services are really important to the community, and if you make these cuts now, they're not gonna come back to the level that they're at right now, okay? Since the arbitration, I've been working with passionate people that are really happy about their jobs, and they're really happy to give back to the community because they're being shown respect by management and by you guys. But now, all that's thrown into question. Morale is at an all-time low at the community centers, and I don't see how Parks and Recreation can come back to be what it is now if you make these cuts. This has been a really overwhelming process. I've been coming to budget hearings for months, and it's really hard for me to sit here and listen to people say, well, we're not actually cutting things, so don't get upset. How can you expect these people not to get upset about these things? These are our lives, and the services that I help provide are vital to the working families in this community that can't afford to live here. So it's mind-boggling to me that this is even on the board right now, and I'm really upset about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next three are,
All right, so where are we on the list?
pardon?
Where are we on the list?
We are on roughly 10, that was the 12th person who spoke, I believe.
Where are we on Commissioner Fish's timeline?
But I think in the next 5 minutes, we have to break to start voting on amendments.
We've got a lot of talking to do. Let's maybe one more, Pat?
Yeah, I don't think it's maybe possible for us to vote on this today. I don't want to shortchange the deliberation that we're gonna have. So I think we may need to have a session tomorrow morning. Because this is vital. I just don't think we can rush it.
I think we have to give 24 hours notice.
Is there a legal opinion on that?
So council could take this up tomorrow afternoon, although the agenda is full. Council can't schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning at this point.
So maybe we should just move to discussion and voting now.
I don't feel good about us just cutting off. All these people traveled a long distance to be here. I just don't feel good about that.
Well, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Commissioner Udaley has a whole presentation scheduled that's supposed to last quite some time. So, I mean, that's what we're actually functionally talking about. And there's a lot of people coming tomorrow at 2 o'clock to prepared to talk about renter protections.
I don't know how our calendar got so booked for today and tomorrow, but I mean, I will always defer. Again, I think, could we stay tonight and take all the testimony and then actually do the vote and deliberation tomorrow?
Yes, you can. Yes. Yes, you can.
I'm asking my colleagues. I need them to agree. I know you guys agree.
It don't matter. You can.
It does matter. Thank you.
It doesn't matter.
So I can do it. The question then is, when are we going to deliberate and vote on the budget?
I first thing.
If you don't.
Shh, please. We're trying to deliberate here. Thank you. We're trying to make a decision.
I called you this morning, Joanne.
I'm deliberating right now, okay? Hang on.
Let's let the commissioner
So the
sort.
question is, I feel that if we try to do it now, we will be rushing through this process. I think we owe it to the public to take the time necessary to actually do the appropriate deliberation. So if we hear all the testimony tonight, there's no reason why we can't take a half hour tomorrow at 2 to actually deliberate before we vote. What do you think, colleagues?
Mayor,
Commissioner Daly.
can we have a 2-minute resource or recess so I can go track down my staff and see if there's any room to budge here?
Sure.
I don't know who we have scheduled to appear. It's a big deal, and we have a time certain, so.
We have a time certain at 2 o'clock, which is supposed to go for 90 minutes on 82nd Avenue. So it's not even the rental piece that's next. It's people who've been waiting for months to talk about 82nd Avenue. But I think my question is to Commissioner Fish, as the person who's challenged with medical issues and has been heroic in how you've been able to keep pace with the schedule, which I'm exhausted by, and I don't know how you keep doing it. What's your preference on how to act?
But we've had extensive public hearings on all these issues. My preference, because I know tomorrow is a jammed afternoon and we're just going to make it even more jammed, is that we take another panel and then move to deliberation. I think, with all due respect, we are well-versed in all the issues. People have done an effective job of advocacy at our public forums and at our council meetings. We can have people stand and identify themselves around issues, but I think kicking the can to tomorrow just creates another problem tomorrow. And I agree with Commissioner Hardesty. I wish we were not in a predicament where all this stuff is piling on, but it is what it is.
Colleagues,
I think, can we take a 5-minute break?
well, I have gotten a response from staff. I'd be perfectly willing to move the hearing, the second reading on fair access and renting, which is scheduled time certain for 3 o'clock tomorrow. It's been significantly delayed already, so I would want to find out what the next time certain we could get is, and not have further delays.
That's really gracious, thank you. I know how important that project is
So
to you.
Thank you.
are you suggesting that we take up the budget at 3 o'clock?
I'm just trying to open up a slot
we do
for,
that.
sure, whatever needs to happen tomorrow.
And what's the time certain at 2, Commissioner Fritz?
It's 82nd Avenue Planning and Zoning Plan, which has been noticed.
So the options are to compress this hearing and get a quick vote, or to reschedule this for tomorrow at 3, and council,
Continue it.
Continue it. And we have been advised by the tax supervision, whatever it's called, that, Jessica, the people that we answer to in terms of budgeting,
Yes,
they have said that a vote tomorrow is as good as a vote tonight?
Yes, they have said that.
You have that flexibility?
You have the flexibility to have a vote tomorrow. I believe that the primary constraint, as you have been discussing, is the amount of time that's available tomorrow, so that's why testimony would be taken today, and it would just be a vote tomorrow.
So if I understand correctly, Commissioner Udaley is very graciously willing to put off fair for a bit,
A short bit, yeah.
a short bit. Then we would continue this hearing to 3 p.m. tomorrow. And then we could continue the vote.
I think it's 3:30, I think.
Oh,
I
it's
think
3:30?
82nd asked for slightly longer.
Yeah, that's correct, 3:30.
And many of us can stay to hear the testimony tonight, which I'm sure Commissioner Fish could review.
Yeah, you're going to have a quorum to hear the testimony tonight, plus you also have 3 other budget matters that follow this.
Good. Okay, good.
Not
So
on my
here's
agenda.
the review of what we've decided to do. So we are not going to take the vote on the budget today or take the vote on the amendments today. We will take that vote tomorrow at 3:30. Those of us who can stick around right now will stick around and continue to hear public testimony. At the end of today, we're not going to vote, but we will continue the hearing to tomorrow. But if you are not here testifying today, you will not have the opportunity tomorrow, just to be super clear. Today is the testimony.
And to be clear, there's an additional time certain that was scheduled for 3 p.m. today to approve the annual budget for Prosper Portland. Because that was a time certain, my understanding is that we would need to open that item. You could do the same thing where you take testimony, but then continue the vote for tomorrow.
Yeah, and I
as well.
don't anticipate nearly as no
Jessica,
disrespect.
so just to be
I don't-
clear, we're going to take testimony, but then close the record on the budget today.
I believe you'll probably continue the meeting till tomorrow.
Once testimony is complete.
Correct.
Okay.
Very
The
good.
only thing left tomorrow will be a vote on the amendments, which include budget notes, and then a vote on the budget and closing statements.
Correct.
Am I correct on that?
And
Good.
there's tax levies as well, but yes.
Okay, so we can continue then with public testimony. Sorry, everybody, thank you for bearing with us while we sort this out. And I want to give a special thanks to Commissioner Udaly. She's been working on her presentation for tomorrow for many, many months, and her willingness to be flexible so that we can have a thorough public vetting of the budget is to be commended, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
And if I might suggest that schedulers get working, I just talked to Commissioner Daly, and there's some thought that an evening hearing, either a Wednesday or a Thursday. So while we're hearing the rest of the testimony, perhaps schedulers could be working with the council clerk's office to see if there's a potential date, because I would think we would need
I've got
to
Jamie on it.
to announce that.
Is there any way that me and the kids can have a chance to speak for just a second? We've been here a really long time and they're losing it.
People with kids, come on up.
Great.
Sorry, we usually,
Sit right here.
they're doing very well.
They're doing really well. We were in the first overflow room and then we were in the balcony. And then my daughter Liberty here has had about enough.
She's had enough. Very good.
Had enough.
Hello, Liberty.
I would really, really, really
Your name for the
appreciate.
record, ma'am?
My name is Kelsey Owens. I'm here on behalf of Parks and Rec, and specifically Selwood, where my family and my son here are in preschool 5 days a week. I actually have a question for all of you, and I know how Commissioner Hardesty feels on this, but what is the plan for families who are already signed up for next year? What's the plan? What are we, I mean, we registered in time. I was up at 7 a.m. that morning to make sure I got a spot because it's competitive. There are wait lists already at Selwood. At Mount Scott, at Southwest Community Center, and at Woodstock, there are wait lists. And that doesn't include the families at Selwood who are about to get the carpet completely pulled out from underneath them. What's the plan? Mr. Wheeler, I've called your office, and when I've asked specifically, is there a contingency plan? The answer has been there is no contingency plan, and that's from your staff, and I recorded it.
Well, to be clear, first of all, just for the record.
Yes.
I don't know, I'm not the Parks Commissioner.
I know.
And so I don't actually.
Well, I was calling when I was hoping that my influence and the influence of others would have perhaps swayed you to propose something different from Commissioner Fish's proposal a couple months ago. So that's when I had that conversation.
I've given it my level best shot on the proposed, and you can certainly disagree with it, and this is
Okay.
your opportunity to say that you do.
Well, Ms. Hardesty's amendment addresses this issue, and it would save us for one more year while we can find other options for the following year. But for 2019 and 2020, Mr. Fish, what do you suggest I do with Xander 5 days a week in the morning when I'm supposed to be studying to go back to school in the fall? What should I do? I am genuinely asking you. And I've asked all of your staff, actually. I'm getting to know the people who answer the phone on a first-name basis at this point because I'm panicking. There is no backup plan. And I'm not exaggerating when I say in our part of the city, and not just Selwood, I'm talking Brooklyn, I'm talking Woodstock, I'm talking even going into Milwaukee and going to Clackamas County, the average is, for the amount of time he spends in school, would be $900 more a month. What should we do? Mr. Fish, do you have anything you can offer me? I don't know if you have children, but
So I have 2 kids. And-
Okay.
What we'd be happy to do is talk to you about a range of options. We're in the process of doing a scan of other options in the community.
Well, I've spoken to Miss Lily, is it? Who sent out an email to preschool parents a couple of months ago to ask where we would prefer to be relocated. And the problem with that equation is that we would be traveling distances that would make the 2-hour and 45-minute window so tight that it would almost be pointless to go home while our kids are at preschool. So can you name any specifics? Are you going to create a busing system from Selwood so that there's an efficient way for parents to get their kids to other centers?
I can't as I sit here, but what you're confirming with me is we need to do a better job of communicating with parents about what the options are.
Right.
And so I'll follow up with that, and I hope you haven't had trouble with my office.
It's been brutal, sir. Actually, it's been brutal with everyone's office. I let us sit in your office, and you might remember I approached you. I gave you a book that I had written to read a story about how children asked their parents to advocate for them, and their parents stood up and did it, and the city listened.
I've got it.
I hope
It
you
was
read
actually
to the
very
end.
impressive.
I hope that you read to the end because it says that not only was the Selwood Community Center saved, but Parks and Rec were expanded into communities that deserve to have their own center.
Thank
We
you.
need more, not less. We are desperate.
Okay, thank you.
Our next three are Fred Granum, Hans Bernhard, and Jack Denton. That's Fred Granum, Hans Bernhard, Jack Denton, Sally Jokin, Mary Pivito, maybe, and Peter Ziegler, and Aaliyah Corbin. If any of you are here in the room, go ahead, take a seat. I think others. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Fred Granum, the Executive Director of the James Beard Public Market. As you're well aware, we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization that's working on a public-private model to bring a regional destination here to Portland. A public market, which is all about food, that will generate approximately 250 jobs, that will be manned by 50 to 60 different independent businesses exclusively selling food. We will, in the course of this public market, we will be providing an array of public benefits of job training, economic development, cooking skills, nutrition training, and wellness programs within the part of the venue. After years of searching for the right location, we are on the cusp of reaching an arrangement with OMSI to be a part of their massive development, anticipating breaking ground in the next 24 to 36 months. This leads us to the stage of our development in which we need to incur approximately $1.2 million in pre-development funds to obtain studies and reports to confirm the feasibility and the preparations for the construction of the market. As a public-private partnership, we look to the private sector and to the public sector to help make this happen. To date, we have over $480,000 of private funding from private individuals, private foundations, and corporations which are supporting our project. We are looking to the state where there's a funding request there before the Ways and Means Committee pending for $400,000, which will be up for consideration next month. We appreciate the mayor including $100,000 in the city budget for our work, and this is an appreciation and a reflection, and something that's just pivotal as we talk to their folks in Salem. They look to the city to make sure the city is pulling its share, and with the $100,000, we're able to work with them, and they recognize the efforts that the city is doing. So with that, we appreciate this effort and hope that this is retained in the final approved budget. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good
Thank you for your
afternoon. My
patience.
name's Sally Jochen. 6 years ago, I worked with a grassroots group, the People's Budget Project, protesting cuts to Portland Parks and Rec and many other services that make this a livable and great city. It's sad to be protesting about the same things again. I attended a town hall in mid-April sponsored by Commissioner Hardesty, in which we attendees got to make suggestions about what we were for and against in many areas of city services. The overwhelming number of sticky notes were put on what I don't want to fund regarding police and what I do want to fund regarding parks. I have a family member who works for parks in the maintenance department, and I'm quite aware that they are never caught up with the work that is needed to keep everything in good condition. Portland has wonderful parks and community centers, and they are very important to many people who use them. They need to be properly maintained, and in addition, I would like to see the fee system reorganized so that classes and activities are affordable for all who want and need them in our city. Where will we get the money for these things? That's where the police come in. I agree with Commissioner Hardesty that since there are currently many police officer vacancies, the funding that was not used, this savings, could be transferred to parks on a one-time basis. Funding would still be available later for the police bureau if and when jobs are filled in the future. In the meantime, let's not make families, children, and seniors constantly worry that their community centers and pools might suddenly close, and let's not create uncertainty and anxiety for the staff at these places. A long-term solution needs to be found so that threats of closures and failure to provide proper maintenance does not keep recurring. City Council should keep things going during the coming fiscal year, using the police savings while pledging at the same time to figure out the long-term solution to funding parks and rec.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Hans Bernhard. I'm a recreation leader. I'm speaking on behalf of Jessica Ramirez, a recreation leader at the Southwest Community Center. This is her picture, you can see. So I'm just going to read off of her testimony. Seeing kids come in as infants and seeing them grow as 7- and 8-year-olds is powerful. Jessica gets the pleasure of seeing the families gain trust and friendship over the years. People have grown close to her, in part because of her Spanish-speaking skills. She acts as a resource to Spanish families every day, helping them navigate parks and recreation resources. Patrons often they come back just to talk to Jessica, as she is the only fluent Spanish-speaking staff. Some may be able to help, but not in the same way as Jessica without an interpreter. She helps make connections with other resources in the community. Losing Jessica as a Spanish-speaking individual at our community center is a really big fear. Who will fill her shoes and could be someone that they could relate to. I provide a full-time, consistent, dedicated public service, or at least Jessica does as well. These cuts would lead to part-time variable hours, and that is a huge hit to a committed workforce. This isn't work that can go somewhere else. Other employees are already working at a capacity, and these staff cuts will mean impacts to kids and families. Reductions in programming are exacerbated by transportation limitations, and there is only one bus line that runs every hour at the Southwest Community Center. Anything after 5 p.m. you can't get to or go home from. Programs that get cut for morning or midday will mean people who need to use the bus won't have program to go to at all if it's available after 5. If her position gets cut, it will mean also losing a lot of the scholarship program as it'll be impacted because she works so hard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, was there a Jack Darrington? Okay, then we're going to go with Miles DeBastien. Sorry about that. Or Mary Pavito, Monica Nettle, Jonathan Cobb, Jillian Johnson.
Are you Jonathan up there? Okay, Jonathan's coming down.
Okay, I'm just calling some names so people can get ready. If you hear your name, come on over. Jillian Johnson was last name. Megan Stout, Royal Harris. Stop there.
Can I provide, I would like to voice for myself. Can I provide you with a paper in case you aren't able to understand me? Miles is asking. And I would request that I have an extra minute because it takes longer to use American Sign Language than it does in the interpretation process. And I do want to point out that CART actually wasn't accessible. I wasn't able to use it. So I would highly suggest that we improve the CART services, especially particularly for low vision people that can't access the CART captions at the top and need to use it on a device. The device I used it on was not accessible. So I would just like to maybe contact your accessibility team in order to talk with someone about how to improve the captions for future.
Could I just comment on that?
Yeah.
The mayor's budget does propose another person in the disability equity team. So we will hopefully have staff who will be able to respond to requests like that. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Dear elected official, my name is Miles Sebastian. I'm a Selwood resident and the founder of the Northwest Deaf Arts Festival and a nonprofit called Simon's Pit. We facilitate arts and cultural events that are inclusive for the deaf and hard of hearing and the disabled community. These endeavors are creating equitable opportunities that are much needed for people with disabilities. As a deaf person, I've struggled with phone calls to the commissioner's offices. The staff answering the phone are not well trained in the deaf relay systems that we have to use. They're just slow to type in or sign. So I keep getting hung up on when I'm trying to contact your offices. So that's the reason why I'm here today, to talk to you in person, because I felt like I could not get through to with other means. Your budget cut to the Portland Parks and Recreation will eliminate the Selwood Community Center. The community center is the only affordable option for preschool and summer camp for my 2 children. Without daycare for my children, I will not be able to commit my time and resources to the nonprofit that I serve, and this will jeopardize projects that are benefiting people with disabilities. Portland considers itself a progressive city. I see many efforts to improve equity and inclusion that focus on racial and gender diversity. Unfortunately, people with disabilities are often left out of this conversation. There's a great need to support disability issues. Please don't make it harder for us. I believe my work makes a significant impact, and I need your support to keep going. If you want to see Portland be a diverse and equitable city for people with disabilities and other minorities, please fully fund Portland Parks and Recreation for another year. I ask Commissioners Fish, Fritz, and Unity to support Commissioner Hardy's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Royal Harris. I am here as a resident of Portland, Oregon, reflecting and commenting on myself personally. I want to speak to the desire to get rid of the gun violence reduction team, and my belief that that would be not in the best interest of Portland as a whole and the African American community, and specifically African American at men for risk of violence. I speak as the first person I've seen here today who is intimately involved with Portland's gang culture, being someone who has been involved since its inception, from the creation with myself and my friends, to being a victim of gun violence, to being someone who has had several members, including a brother who was killed due to gun violence, and understanding the nature of Portland's gun violence reduction team. Initially, that was the gang enforcement team. While I can honestly say it has never been a panacea for Portland's issues between the Black community and Portland police, what I do say is in 30 years, it has evolved into the best situation we have for Portland police to engage young Black men of color who might be involved in violent activity. To dispel some of the things I heard today, first of all, one of the things I heard is that all Black men or most Black men have a fear of engaging Portland police and walking away. I can say from doing it for the majority of my life, under the right circumstances, that is a fallacy that both a lot of myself and a lot of my friends share is not true. While I can also talk to the fact that not every Portland police officer is kind or courteous or content, I do say what we have within that unit is the best attempt we've had at community policing so far, and I do say that we need to reinvest in those efforts with the oversight needed to do 21st century policing for our community. And I do say this as a representative of those men who have been killed and shot, and those families who represented the trauma that goes along with this. Community policing by those skilled in understanding our communities and well-versed in what happens is a lot better than dispersing the unit.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor?
Commissioner Hurst.
Thank you. I appreciate your statement when you were invited by the mayor to come and tell us why the gun reduction team was important. I appreciate you coming back today. Just like I don't speak for all the African Americans in the community, I don't expect you to speak for all the African Americans in this community either.
And I choose not to. I speak for those from the community who have been impacted and engaged in what we
You
call
speak
gang
from
gun
one
violence.
perspective, and I speak from another. And though I respect your opinion, I want to be clear. Neither the gang enforcement unit or the gun reduction unit is community policing. Community policing is about knowing the community and being able to use your words to help solve community problems.
And I can say respectfully, from being someone engaged by Portland Police Gang Enforcement Unit, Gun Violence Reduction Team, and Portland Police Entertainment District officers and regular officers, I can distinguish and delineate those who have embraced community policing versus those who have embraced policing communities. And I will say with some certainty, since I am a content expert, that since I have been speaking since the last week when I came to City Council with over 20 individuals intimately involved through law enforcement, through community, and through gang activity, that what I say resonates in the sense that what we do have is the best effort at community policing that a lot of people have engaged. And
Thank
they
you
also
very
say
much.
that it needs to be improved.
All I want to say is that that is not community policing. You can have your opinion. I just want you to know that is not community policing. And I've also talked to former and current gang members. And I don't know anyone other than the people that were invited here that think gun enforcement or gang enforcement is community
I
policing.
would say the ones who came last week that you walked out on would say that's true.
I didn't walk out on anybody. It was not scheduled on my calendar. I made time to come and meet because the mayor invited me. So don't try to pretend like somehow it was something that I was already scheduled to do.
No,
It
don't
was
know
an
your schedule, ma'am.
organized.
I just know your
It was an
behavior.
organized effort to sell us on this gun reduction team, and it didn't work. Thank you.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you for taking the time to come. I appreciate you speaking your truth, and I know my colleague speaks hers, and it's important for us to hear both perspectives.
Thank you, Royal, and I appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan Cobb, Jillian Johnson, Sam Diaz, Gail Hofnagel, Huyen Nam, Dewana Harris. Oh, I think. You wanna go?
Yeah.
As soon as I call your name, go ahead and
All right.
come up, and then
Hi.
I'll call the names again.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Cobb. I am a case manager for transition projects and proud member of ASME Local 88. My colleagues, including Jillian Johnson, had to leave, unfortunately. Our union is in negotiations this year, but of course we receive public funding and are dependent on that in order for better conditions. Everyday TPI staff do vital work with vulnerable populations that much of our society would rather ignore and forget about. People who would rather dismiss homelessness as a personal failing, the result of a lack of moral character, rather than something that could happen to them. They don't want to consider that they themselves could be one mispayment, one medical emergency, one family crisis away from becoming homeless themselves. At TPI, we see the reality of homelessness up close. We see the toll on people's mental health, their physical and spiritual well-being, from not only being deprived of money and resources, but robbed of their very dignity. We also see the hope that we bring to people. We're able to recover that sense of dignity. We provide not just a roof over their head, but a welcoming space where they can feel safe and included, where their essential dignity is recognized. TPI workers are out there saving lives every day, first and foremost by helping people out of the dangers they experience on the streets, but also by giving CPR and first aid, administering Narcan for drug overdoses, and de-escalating people experiencing mental health crises. I myself once saved a man from choking. For all the work we do for homelessness, it's a sad irony that as many as 1 in 5 TPI employees have themselves experienced homelessness while working with this agency. Just as society undervalues the lives of homeless people themselves, so too do they undervalue the work of those who serve homeless, We're proud of the work we do and lives we save, but it's unsustainable for many of us. Low pay and burnout lead to higher turnover rates that leave us frequently understaffed and overworked, which in turn leads to more people leaving the agency. That's why 83% of TPA employees have worked here for less than 3 years. So I just want to say thank you, and please, I urge you to fund Portland homeless projects better. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Commissioner Fritz.
I just want to thank you for sticking around and thank my colleagues. Thank you for wearing your Oregon FSME t-shirt today.
Good
Hi there, I'm Gail Hofnagel. I'm the chairman of the Friends of Selwood Community Center. I feel like we're beginning to know each other because I've come here, year after year. Today I'm going to be really short. Selwood Community Center has been slated to be closed, and unlike the closure of other community centers in the past, like, for instance, Hillside and Fulton, who had a year to transition, we've been given 3 months, and trying to have the neighborhood association do a good job of making that transition possible is becoming really difficult. With the 30 years of deferred maintenance in the building, we've hit several roadblocks already that's going to make it challenging for us, and what we'd like is additional time so that we can make a smoother transition. That's it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Hyung Nam. I'm a public school teacher, and before teaching in public schools, I worked as a social worker with runaway and homeless kids. And I know that both my students now and the young adults I worked with in the past, parks and recreation is really crucial. And I really appreciate Commissioner Hardesty's framing of this, that our budget is a moral statement. And I want us to think about, what are we saying if the majority of our budget, we call it public safety, but actually goes to policing, and we're talking about cutting vital services that serve families at every age that are core parts of our community, and instead we want to fund not only the gang enforcement task force, that's really the same people that are running the thing, but also things like body cams and other kind of things, when we know that from recent surveys, over 70% of the public do not trust the police. So what are we saying about our city that we want to fund these things to basically keep us? I mean, I'm a teacher because I believe in the future, and I don't want a future where we keep on policing people and not offering the kind of services that's going to allow people and families to thrive, and instead we keep on reproducing the system where we incarcerate more people than any other country in the entire world. So I want us to think about, what can we invest in the future? Thank you.
Was there Sam Diaz? Okay, we'll go with Dewana Harris, James Kelly, Siobhan McKinstry, Tim Ledwith, Lee Williams, Alice Shapiro. We got 3 here. Okay, next is Carol Moist, Charles Iragu, and then Tom Karwaki.
All right. Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Dewana Harris, and I work for Transition Projects, where their mission is to help people as they transition from homelessness to housing. I'm in a unique role as someone who has worked in a number of their programs that you fund, and I now oversee and direct my agency's equity and inclusion and peer mentor efforts, and have firsthand experience of how your investments and support impact the lives of people experiencing homelessness. I see this in action every day. I live and breathe this work. Your investment allowed a participant to go from homelessness to shelter to sobriety and addressing their mental health needs, to achieving and maintaining housing stability, and now for over 3 years, I'm pleased to say that they are currently employed as a property manager. That's right, your effort led someone from homelessness to property management. Thank you for your ongoing investment and support of housing initiatives and in the homelessness work.
Excellent testimony. Thank you for sharing that story. That's uplifting, and it's well received. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
How do you do? My name is Lee Williams. I am a citizen of Portland and a guy. Mayor Wheel, I'd like to quote back to you the focus that you were putting into the budget, as you said in the last budget hearing that we all went to. You said you were looking to preserve the core values that made Portland a great city. You said you wanted to ensure that the prosperity and services we currently enjoy are preserved for future generations. And you also said you wanted to focus on the things that make a real difference in the lives of Portlanders. And as soon as you said that, I thought, he's going to do it. He's going to add more community centers. But that's not the way it went down. That's not the way it's going down at all. It's clear that things are going to get closed and that you guys don't have an option for really preserving what we've got. I would suggest, I apologize, I'm new to the whole local government process, but the thing that was mentioned when we began, the state revenue sharing, the 22 million, why can't somebody propose an amendment to shave a little bit of that off and help us out? That would probably fix it, at least for the short term. I wanted to give you some numbers. Selwood Community Center, which is who I'm advocating for, the preschool currently serves 56 children. The after-school program serves 85 kids, and all those kids are on waiting lists at the elementary schools, at least 50 or 60 deep. The judo classes, a mixture of kids and adults, mostly kids, has 50 each week. Other classes are about 100 people each week. And the summer camps are 160 kids per week, every week for the entire summer. This is not a low-effort community center. Sorry. I would say, one last thing I would throw in, we were shown this beautiful graphic at that budget hearing where 88% is immutable of the budget and 12% is kind of loosey-goosey. Why can't these foundational community centers be put in that 88%? You could probably do that if you put your minds to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fritz.
If I could just address your question about the state revenue sharing, that money's already included in when we're looking at who's getting what. So it's, some of it's dedicated
then
to.
Why was there opportunity to make testimony about it?
Because it's a requirement, it's a formality that this is often about when we do all of the kind of dotting the i's and crossing the t's.
I see. Well, I would say moving forward then, in future years, maybe that should be taken a look at earlier in the budget process.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks for being here. Good afternoon.
Hi, Alice Shapiro. Much of what I agree with has already been said in terms of the jobs that will be lost and in terms of service to daycare. I was really moved by the young woman who spoke with her 2 children. Even in supposedly affluent communities, people cannot afford private daycare. They depend on this. And in other communities that are less fortunate than the Selwood community that I inhabit, are even going to be in more dire straits. That's not exactly why I'm here. I'm here for all of those reasons. But I'm also here to talk about social infrastructure, which I could quote a social worker, that social infrastructure is the glue that holds communities together. And it is just as real as the infrastructure for water, power, communications, although it's harder to see, and also as important as policing. I have seen many of the benefits firsthand, but it's not about me or about you. It's about the vitality of our city and the ideals for which we purportedly stand. Portland calls itself the city that works. I wonder for whom it's now working. Without funding to continue our social interactions, we will become more isolated and we will not be able to get to know our neighbors and come together when crises occur. When I go to a community center, and I mostly go to Selwood and Mount Scott, I see, especially at Mount Scott, which is larger than Selwood, but other places as well, this is truly a place where people of all ages mingle. It's not just about the activities we attend, but it's where people get to know each other, get to trust each other, get to see each other, get to say hello to each other. Without our community centers and our parks, this will be gone. We'll become, as my husband said, and I was born in Chicago, but we become like Chicago, where we know they don't have the infrastructure and the community that we purportedly have. I want to live in Portland. I don't want to live anywhere else. I want the bridge funding. I want a way to make our communities stable. So there's more I can say, but I did turn in written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next are Tom Karwacki, Jordan Alashim, and Simab Husseini. Oh, yeah, Charles, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And colleagues, just for the record, item 480 has been rescheduled to next Wednesday, May 29th at 2 p.m. time certain. When we read that later, I'll make note of that. But if you're here for item 480, you don't need to be. Good afternoon.
And you just wasted 4 hours.
Yeah, sorry.
Who's on?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charles Uragi. I am a resident of Selwood, and I'm also coming here to talk about the planned closure of community centers. But I thought I would maybe try and change the focus of the conversation from continuing budget efforts to continuing vital services. It seems as though from every year, these community centers are threatened with closure, and that their services, them and their services are no longer viewed as a central function of the parks. So it is understandable that in that sense that the city has arrived at a decision to cease funding these activities. However, no one believes that halting the services provided at the community centers would not entail significant social costs, and we definitely heard that lady with her kids. I think that's very significant. In view of these two considerations, I would like to suggest that the city make use of a basic tool of change management in either business or government, and that is to allocate funds for the transition costs from the old policy to a reformed policy. In this case, funds to draw private actors into making a viable decision to take over the maintenance of these critical services. There's no alternative currently to these services, as this woman was just speaking about. The hardship the concerned communities will face may well be severe, especially in the case of childcare. Childcare services are already in short supply, and the closure will create a crisis in these communities. Not addressing this transition problem in the short 3 months we have in front of us would be irresponsible, and I propose the city go forward with the closure as anticipated or perhaps delayed until year end, but also allocate funds for a responsible transition. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Jordan Elson. Thank you, commissioners, for hearing from us. And I'm here to urge this commission to adopt Commissioner Hardesty's amendment to defund the Gun Violence Reduction Task Force. Thank you for introducing that amendment, and thank you for seconding it. Thank you. I don't want to spend my time explaining why I believe this force is a symbol of racism. I think if someone does not understand how a body that turns 6% of our population into almost 60% of their stops is a symbol of racism, I honestly don't know what to say to you. I instead want to say this. I, like many Portlanders, voted for Commissioner Hardesty for multiple reasons, but one of those reasons is because it's important to me to move Portland towards anti-racism, not just non-racism. I have watched many candidates in my lifetime campaign on police reform and utterly fail to do anything of any significance. And at this point, I have understood that sometimes the best person for the job is a woman of color. Most Portlanders, I believe, feel this way. And it's not just anti-fascists or anarchists, it's people like me who donate and volunteer and take time off of work to show up to support their candidates when they uphold their campaign promises. Defunding a symbol of racism is literally the bare minimum of what we need to be doing in order to move forward. It's also our moral responsibility, and I believe your civic responsibility. I have a list I want to name: Kenise Derrick Hayes, Andre Gladen, Jeb Colin Brock, Samuel Rice, Patrick Kimmons, John Ella Fritz, Carl Kyrene Johnson. Some of them are armed, all of them were shot and killed by Portland police in the last 2 years. I have one more name: Angel Granados Diaz, a student with a shotgun who was safely disarmed by a school staffer. The only gun violence problem Portland has is a police gun violence problem. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Karwacki, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Portland Bureau of Transportation Bureau and Budget Advisory Committee. Farrell Richards, I think, might still be in the room, and Momika Saunders, our chair, was here but had to leave. We want to thank you, number one, Mayor, for including Adaptive Bike Town and the Resiliency Plan in the budget notes and the derelict RV program, which are also very important aspects as well as other capital projects. Vision Zero is kind of an important thing. Now, at our Bureau committee meetings, we start with the reading of the names of everyone who has died that month on the streets of Portland, and it's very difficult. Vision Zero starts with 3 E's: engineering, education, and enforcement. And it really, we'd ask you, Mayor, to try to spend more resources on the enforcement side with the Police Bureau, especially. That's really an important one. 25% of the Traffic Enforcement Division should not be sent to other parts of the police department. We have to enforce our traffic laws, or we may have to look at other innovative ideas of enforcement, like what you're looking at with respect to the transit police. But I think that something we really want to do is look at, it's a combined effort. All 3 parts of the, the bureaus can't be, they have to march together. And it's not just on this, it's on the RV enforcement, a lot of other areas. More coordination between bureaus would really be helpful. That's it.
No argument there. Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. So, you're from the Bureau of Transportation, is that correct?
That's correct. On the advisory committee, yes.
You're on
Not
advisory.
staff, community.
I
And
got
on
it.
the community, I'm not a
Right.
staff person, sorry.
I got it now. And so you talked about the need for more enforcement. And you are aware that the areas with the highest crash areas are areas where the Department of Transportation has failed to actually do infrastructure improvements that create safe communities. Every area is in East Portland where there are high crash areas. And so I'm concerned that our knee-jerk reaction is more enforcement rather
Absolutely understood, and I think we had agreed with that, and we also agreed with the police who had looked at the police where the traffic cameras were going to be placed originally as well. But I think the whole issue of, we've also supported the equity prospects of the Bureau of Transportation, which would have significantly increased the number of resources for engineering and so forth, and
I don't know
improvements
what
on
equity
PBOT.
means when it comes to how the Department of Transportation spends their money. I mean, because the roads all look the same color, but we lack roads in East Portland, we lack lights. So I'm just trying to figure out what's
Well,
the mix?
equity is one of our first criteria, and as a committee that we look at, and I know that the Bureau is really, that's one of their main criteria as well. So I think the Bureau has been trying to do what it can. I don't think all of those issues can be addressed right now. We were just looking at the budget that was presented here, so.
So what does equity mean to you in this process?
Well, looking through the equity lens deals with all of the different investments of the Bureau. And so we're just an advisory committee, but with respect to that, we've spent almost half of our time dealing with equity issues of looking at where the investments have been made and are being made in the future and where are the needs. The issue of enforcement was just because of some situations that have occurred and that it requires both bureaus to look at. That was a separate issue. But I understand. I mean, I think what you're asking is how do we really bake into all of the decisions of a bureau equity? And I think that's a discussion that I'd like to extend at another time.
That actually wasn't my question at all. My question was, what did equity mean to you? And you talked totally around my question. And so I just appreciate the fact that you just don't know the answer to the question that I've asked.
I can speak to myself, but you're asking me almost in my role here as a committee, and that's a little different.
I'd actually like to intervene because I don't think it's fair to put a volunteer member of our budget committee on the spot like that. I want to.
With all due respect, I mean, he's the one that's been pushing the equity question. So if he doesn't have a definition of equity when he's saying that everything is through an equity lens, I do have an I should be able to challenge that perception.
And I absolutely agree. And I'm going to say that on the equity lens, that's what the Bureau has developed a rather robust format for looking at things. So I'm going to just let it go at that.
So in this case, as a community member who's serving on the budget committee, it's a kind of an awkward position to be put in to speak on behalf of the Bureau. That's the only reason I was trying to intervene, and I just want to correct a few things that were said. We have high crash networks all over the city. Many of them are in East Portland, but they're also in the central city and including on the west side. Some of them are owned by ODOT. And as I think I've explained before, with Vision Zero and fixing our streets, we use an equation heavily weighted toward equitable outcomes. And that means when we look at these high crash networks, we're prioritizing the ones that are within low-income communities and communities of color. And I know you have concerns about enforcement. I want to take this opportunity to say, number one, because of the nature of these streets, a lot of people involved in these crashes are moving through those communities. And I've asked if there's any way that we can start collecting data when we have a crash on where people are coming from and where they're going, because my instinct, and I can't support it with data now, I just want to be honest about that, but my instinct, because this is also true with our highways, is that it's people moving through these neighborhoods, endangering those communities, endangering those pedestrians. I am an anti-authoritarian. I am someone who wants to really keep government out of our private business. I don't believe in victimless crimes. I think we should be free to make a lot of personal choices that we are not. However, when it comes to taking other people's lives into your own hands, driving recklessly, that is somewhere where I am willing to support as much intervention as it takes, because we can't engineer our way. We can't solely engineer our way out of this. We certainly have a lot of work to do, and so does ODOT. We can't educate our way out of this. People know that there's very limited enforcement, and they are acting outrageously on our streets. I, on an almost daily basis, see people running red lights from a full stop, shooting the gap with pedestrians and endangering them. We just had a crash on Greeley, unfortunately, where a vehicle crossed the center line, hit an SUV, and the driver and passenger were killed just today. So it's an issue that I'm painfully aware of and really seeking solutions on. Want to make sure that we eliminate as much bias in the system as we possibly can, but you know, people in East Portland, I think, are 4 times more likely to die in traffic crashes than people elsewhere in the city. So it's a tough one. And I want to thank you for coming and just.
Yes. And thank you. I mean, I understand where you're asking. You're legit, but I can give you my answers, but they're not necessarily the committee, nor am I a representative of the Bureau, so.
And you just know that I asked everybody what their own personal definition, and very few people actually have one. Okay. So thank you.
Oh, I have one, but Commissioner Fritz, your amendment did pass. Is that what I understood earlier?
Which one?
The BDS historical
It passed this morning because we had the
gotcha.
change in the rates. It has not yet
Fine.
been voted on as part of the budget, so we're literally halfway there.
That was a different hat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Next is Seemob Husseini, Paige Lehman, and Kelsey Owolls, I believe is the last name. Anna Swanson, Jack Herbert, and the last person I showed who signed up is Chris Lowe. So if you signed up and didn't hear your name, let me know.
Great. And other than that, the list is closed. Come on up,
If you,
gentlemen.
if I called your name, sit down.
Come
Have
on
a
up.
seat.
Would you like to go first, please?
Okay. My name's Jack Herbert. So 3 things I want to say quickly. I've been to a lot of public demonstrations, and often they're way over-policed. You got a lot of money you could save in the police bureau. I mean, most of those things, most people are committed to nonviolence in those. And when the police throw explosives at people, you know, that's not public safety, that's public danger. So I think you have a lot of changes to make in both amount of policing on those things and how you police. Another thing is there's an awful lot of building going on in Portland. I heard that it had more construction than any other city in the country, and you're giving away all these tax breaks that you don't need to be given away as incentives. There's a lot of money you could be taxing. And the other thing is that right now, as you said, Mayor, Portland's pretty prosperous. These are good times in terms of incomes, and they're going to be better times. You know, they're probably as good as they're going to get. And there are a lot of people making a lot of money, and they aren't paying their fair share for the city that produces all that wealth for them. And the more people thrive in this city, the more money they make. So you need to tax them. And if this is a year where you think you can't go change the funding, how you're going to tax to produce the funds for this budget, you know, you need to do something. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
But next year you need to get it right, get those taxes, and I think you need to do some taxing now for this budget. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Anna Swanson. I'm here representing Care Not Cops and Critical Resistance Portland. And I'm here to call for the elimination, as Joanne has suggested with her amendment, of the gun violence reduction team. And not only that, for you all to really rethink how we enforce laws in the city, and specifically to think about what gang policing is, and whether just the reduction, or like the elimination of that team would actually create safer communities, in that I have no trust that that won't get shifted to another part of the police bureau. So making a commitment to not engage in gang policing at all is something that I would ask for as a part of that. And I appreciate that, Mr. Wheeler, you are naming that you would want to have public conversations about these things and make more space for this. I think that is incredibly necessary. And I would also add to that, we are advocating for the opposition to that $10 million increase to the Portland Police Bureau that you have asked for. You ask for more money for the police every year. They already have over $200 million. And as you've seen today, people are begging for resources like parks to be kept. People need resources that are life-affirming, that support their needs, like recreation, like healthcare, like education. They don't need to be policed. And I also want to thank you, Joanne, for articulating around this idea of mere conversations, that what we need to be looking at is not just sort of the costs and benefits budget-wise of policing, but the actual lived impacts on our community members, especially Black and brown folks who walk away from those mere conversations impacted mental health-wise, afraid. Like, it has a huge impact, and you need to actually pay attention to that and make decisions based on that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Chris Lowe. I live in Woodstock neighborhood, but when my daughter was young, she spent a lot of time at the Selwood Community Center, and I could tell you stories about that, but I'm not. I want to move to a different level here. Commissioner Fish, in talking about the Parks Bureau budget, has spoken repeatedly about a structural deficit, and it's time to stop kicking that down the road. I believe that is a mistaken analysis. The structural deficit is in the entire city budget. And you have been kicking that down the road by continuing to compartmentalize in the areas of responsibility of the different commissioners. And That siloing does not have to wait until changing the system of government. You can stop siloing it now, and you need to do that. One city, one budget. Look at the needs of all the communities. When I look at the closure of the Selwood Community Center, I think I see developers who want to gentrify Selwood and Westmoreland into Eastmoreland kind of prices, right? And I think you, with the TIF financing, have actually a conflict of interest in how you even think about these things that creates a preferential option for the rich to change a term from the Catholic social teachings. I also think you need to look at these things together. When the woman who did the sit-in was talking about childcare, that's in the context of our rental crisis. It's in the context of an overall cost of living that is driving people literally out of the city. Some people, not others. And until you look at this and until you decide to tax the rich, this is a class war budget, and it's a war against the poor and the lower middle class and the people who are precarious in the younger generations. And I think you need to just kind of face up to that and reframe your whole thinking. The era of austerity, in the best employment economy in 50 years, we're told, we're looking at a cuts budget. Something is wrong with that picture. There should not be a cuts budget in that circumstance. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got a minute 59 left.
Huh?
We've got a minute 59 left.
Well,
It went 1 second and stopped. It was 2 minutes.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Mayor?
Is that it?
I'm sorry, that's all who signed up.
Okay, good. Commissioner Hardesty, you had a question?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I handed out an article that I just saw in the Portland in the Oregonian about your plan to put $1.6 million into school resource officers. And I'm a bit surprised that we're not having a conversation about that as it pertains to the budget. Do you have an amendment that would do this, or is this just something that's going to happen out of the public eye?
That is part of the base budget for the Portland Police Bureau. It's not a change to the budget.
It is not a change to the budget. We already are giving $1.6 million for school resource officers. This says we're expanding it. The article that I'm reading says we're expanding this, and there have been conversations with school districts, but not with the city council in regard to expanding school resource officers.
So all that I know is there are no new resources that have been approved that I'm aware of for the school resource officer program. What has been included is what was included in the current year budget. But we can follow up with the police bureau and continue the conversation.
Can we ask Chief Outlaw to come up? Because at the last time we talked about school resource officers, I was told that we weren't funding them, and the school districts weren't funding them. So I'd love to know how that happened. Thank goodness the Oregonian was publishing today. Hi, Chief.
Hi there.
The question is in regard to school resource officers. The last conversation we had about school resource officers were that the school districts weren't funding them and we weren't funding, we were just backing off from this. But now I see 1.6 million for school resource officers.
Well, this is a new conversation for us as well. So.
Oh, really? You didn't
Yeah.
know either?
Well, as far as we know, there's nothing new. There's nothing added to what we've already done. So unless
Yeah, there's
Bob has
I have
something
not
new.
read the article, but
Oh,
there,
here, I'll give you a copy.
but there has been no change in the budget or staffing level, at least the number of allocated positions for this program.
I think we're just surprised because there had been a previous conversation about the district taking on the cost of the SROs, which created a larger conversation in the community around whether the school community's staff, families, students wanted SROs. And the school board voted for it and then voted against it. And there was lots of student kind of input. And then we heard nothing. And now we discover that it's back in the budget. So it's a surprise to me as well.
As well as being told that there's going to be 12 school resource officers, and I thought we had a limit in patrol officers. So, but we have 12 officers who could spend their days in schools. I think I share Commissioner Udaley's shock that this was not something that we had been informed was being actually included in the budget.
We'll follow back with you on that. Like I said, actually, I haven't shared that with you. The last meetings that we had with the school district was that there was support for police officers in school, but the question was around who would pay for it. And we recognized that we had some time there. There wasn't a need to make a hasty decision, given that the schools are still in session. So we hadn't had any discussion since then. And like I said, we are not aware of anything as far as expansion or anything being added. So
I hope we get that information before we're voting on the budget, because that's going to be a key question that we need answered before we vote tomorrow afternoon. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Provide information tomorrow.
Thank you. It seems to me this is just a matter of where are the officers stationed. And this is a program that's been going for quite some time. We made an attempt to ask school districts to pay to have the officers located in the schools. And we also heard, and there's data to show that having them there actually is a good thing and is a more effective way.
So, and I appreciate this. This is a bigger policy discussion. I'm not sure we want to have it right now.
I'm just not surprised. I guess is the
I'm
point.
going to say why I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because there's no change to the budget. This is an allocation of resources that is the same as the allocation as last year. It was in the Cal target. There has not been a decision by the city council to eliminate that program that I'm aware of. And I'll second what the chief said. We have met with the superintendents and the leadership, and in some cases, board chairs of the school districts in question, and they told us to a person unequivocally they want the program. And so the question now is, how do we fund it? And unless we decide we want to go in a different direction, which as a council we can do. But the question is, how do we fund it on an ongoing basis, and how do you ensure equity amongst the districts?
Well, with all due respect, we heard loud and clearly from the students at these schools that they do not want an expansion of police services in their school. So I guess if you talk to the school board and you talk to teachers without talking to the people who will be most impacted by having law enforcement walking through the school, you could conclude that people want it. But the people that will be impacted, the ones who will be stopped, questioned, searched, I think also need to weigh in on this question. And I just find it disappointing that I have to read it in the Oregonian, because I actually thought that while we were having these conversations, we were going to continue to have the policy conversation. But you're right, this is not the day for it. But if we're voting on this budget, I sure would like to know the answer to how the school districts knew and we didn't as the city council. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. So, Jessica, it's my understanding then that we're going to continue the hearing, and I have the language to do that unless there's any further discussion.
Nope, that is correct, Mayor. So tomorrow, we will hear if there are any additional individual amendments. We will vote on those additional, the individual amendments that have been put forward, and then we'll vote to approve of the budget, and we will also approve the tax levies tomorrow. And approve
All right, good, very good. So this meeting of the Budget Committee is continued to Thursday, May 23rd at 3:30 p.m. in Council Chambers, City Hall. This concludes the hearing on the City of Portland's budget. I just got a late-breaking question. I understand Prosper Portland is here, so if we continue this part, we can still do the Prosper Portland budget. Is that correct? Because I understand only 2 people have signed up.
Yes.
Okay, so we are then adjourned as the City Budget Committee, and I will quickly move to my notes here. Yeah, we're not done yet, sorry. So we're going to move that, we're going to move that. That is now continued. Carla, you're still with us. Could you please read time certain item 478?
Yeah, we're getting the Prosper Portland clerk right now.
I gotta find my notes. All right.
Approve the annual budget of Prosper
Any candy
Portland
left?
for fiscal year 2019-20.
All right, I'm now convening The Prosper Portland Budget Committee, for the purpose of approving the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. The Budget Committee members received Prosper Portland's budget message on Thursday, May 9th. The Budget Committee also took public testimony on the Prosper Portland budget on the evening of May 9th. Copies of Prosper Portland's approved budget change memo were provided to the Budget Committee on Tuesday, May 14th. I now request that Pam call the roll.
Commissioner Fritz?
Here.
Fish? Hardesty?
Here.
Udaly?
Here.
Mayor Wheeler?
Here, I'm now calling for a motion to consider the changes to the proposed budget which were presented in change memo and Exhibit A.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty, a second from Commissioner Fritz. Now, Prosper Portland staff, Kimberly Branham, will come up and describe some of the changes and answer any questions regarding the change memo. Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Commissioners, Kimberly Branham with Prosper Portland. I'm Executive Director. I'm joined by Tony Barnes, who's our Finance Manager, and he's going to walk through the proposed
Great,
budget
thank you.
amendments, and then we're happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Tony Barnes, Finance Manager at Prosper Portland. The budget change memo for Prosper Portland includes several items which align Prosper Portland's budget with the City of Portland's proposed budget and changes that were considered at the work session last week. Those changes include adjustments to Economic Development General Fund and Housing Community Development Funds related to the Portland Film Office, as well as adjustments in the general fund to match the City of Portland proposed budget. It also includes a reduction in housing community development funding related to total amount of community development block grant dollars for the Portland Housing Bureau. And then also housing appropriations. There's a decrease in appropriations to match the Portland Housing Bureau's recommended approved budget for next fiscal year in the tax increment districts. And finally, there's an increase in appropriations of $2 million for infrastructure related to South Park blocks. It's related to a prior bond refinancing in the district that would be used for an eligible tax exempt project in the district.
Very good. So I'm now calling for, well, first of all, does anybody have any questions? It was succinct and to the point. Thank you. I'm now calling for any individual amendments to the memo from commissioners. And of course, you need to specifically state an amount and a purpose if you want to make any amendments. And it's my understanding, Director Branham, there are no amendments you need me to bring on behalf of the Bureau?
There's potentially several amendments related to the City of Portland budget before you. They'll be voted on tomorrow, I believe, that would impact this budget. So I'd recommend potentially continuing this budget as well after public testimony.
Very good. Okay, I was not aware of that, but I'm sure we're happy to do that. Very good. So does anybody have any amendments at this particular juncture? No. Very good. Okay, public testimony. Who has stuck around? Let's find out.
Dr. Jim Guadino and Jackie Walker.
Maybe gone.
Okay.
Everybody's in chambers.
Yeah.
And
Moving
all the
right
other
along.
rooms are closed at this point? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we obviously don't have any amendments, therefore we don't need any motions or second, and you'd like us to go ahead and continue this hearing then until tomorrow afternoon? Do we need a time certain? So we picked 3:30, I believe it was, time certain for the budget hearing. What time do you want to say for this?
It depends on how long your amendments would take, but maybe 4? Is that realistic? And then
No.
if you start,
But you can do it after the
you
time.
can do it after the
We
time
don't want to be
certain, you
hanging
just
around
can't do
waiting
it
to
before.
Oh,
So if
okay,
you
I
said
see what you're
4 and you
saying.
don't take it up to 4:30,
Okay,
that's fine.
that's fine. We'll go ahead and do that, but with the understanding that it'll probably be later than that for those who want to actually come in. Great.
And Mayor, I take it the record is closed.
And the record is closed.
And I just want to state that I will check to see if those two individuals who wanted to speak had sent us emails, and if they did, I'll be sure to read them.
Yeah, that would actually be helpful. Very good. Okay, so that completes items number 477 and 478. 480 got moved. 479, I doubt that individual is still here. So what do we want to do on 479, Mustafa? It has already been moved. So 479 and 480 have been they've both been moved?
To when?
Could you come
Can you
speak into
speak
the
in the,
microphone,
just speak in
please?
the microphone, just so it's on the record and other people can hear?
Don't be shy.
Mustafa Washington with the mayor's office. 479 has been recalled back to our office, Mayor. Because we knew this was going to be a long day, so we tried to cut some things short. So we took the PSEP appointment and we called it back to our office. And our policy team is going to come bring it back.
I don't think that item has been read, though.
Could you please read it, just because I honestly can't remember whether we read it or not. Can you read 479, please? Oh, we need Carla. Carla, can you read 479? We're pulling it back, but.
Not really.
Did we already read that?
Was Prosper Portland adjourned?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, we're
It
adjourned.
was.
Prosper Portland. You may go.
Thank you.
479, appoint Britton Massback to the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing for a term to expire June 30, 2020.
Very good, and due to the long day and not wanting to keep the appointee sitting around, we are going to reschedule that for tomorrow afternoon. No? When?
It's a student.
Okay, so we'll work, it's a student, so we're going to work around the student's schedule. Very good. All right,
And then 480, you announced earlier that there was a reschedule, but I think Carla could call the item and then you could state the new time.
yes, if
catch
I can
that.
remember when the new time was.
480 is revised residential solid waste and recycling collection rates and charges effective July 1, 2019. I have the new date as May 29th, 2 p.m. time certain.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you, Carla. We are adjourned.